Chapter 1827 A Different Kind of Great Battle. Chapter 1827 A Different Kind of Great Battle. Ling Han was very speechless. The two great elites seemed utterly determined to tear his clothes apart so that he would be naked. Most importantly, this did not have the slightest significance, yet Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng still looked like they would win as long as they had torn his clothes off him, which Ling Han did not know whether to laugh or cry at. And the problem was Ling Han did not have the slightest desire to be bare and naked. To say nothing of the fact that his wife and bewitching maiden-row were still here. Even if they weren't here, he had no interest to expose himself completely to the two of them. If they were so intent on tearing clothes, they should just tear off their own. Ling Han was furious. Come on then, wasn't it just tearing off clothes? Did they think he didn't know how to go about doing it? He also used his techniques and made a move on Zai Bingyun's and Luo Changfeng's clothes. He would really like to see who would be bared first. The three king among kings fought fiercely. This scene was naturally incredibly grand, yet bewitching maiden-row was watching in shock, wearing a very strange expression on her face. You guys, are you really emperor tiers? There is no other emperor tier like you people. Making a move on each other's clothes, they were just like old housewives or hoodlums on the streets, tearing and pulling at each other. There was really no taste to it. Is it really all right for you to act like that? Now that the great battle to tear off clothes had been launched, even Ling Han was unable to escape. His physique was indeed very strong, and he was unafraid of the attacks from two great kings among kings, but his clothes weren't. In the face of having two great emperor tiers so determined to attack, even if it meant that they would be injured, how could they not be damaged quickly? Even if the clothes that he was wearing were woven using top-grade saintly material, which had also been fused with the celestial wings of certain immortal beasts, how could they manage to hold up to the desperate attacks of celestial king-tier techniques of two-thirds severance emperor tiers? However, though the clothes on Ling Han had turned into pieces, Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were not all that much better off either. The clothes they were wearing were also ripped. They practically looked like beggars. This caused Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng to feel fear. That was because they knew that they were not able to resist the fire element of heaven and earth here, and once the blood dragon armor had been torn open, they would definitely be dead. But this also firmed their resolve. That was because since Ling Han had counterattacked so fiercely, it had to mean that he had been scared. Then let's just see who will be the first to fall. I'll rip. The two great emperor tiers gritted their teeth and continued to rip like mad. You rip? Don't I know how to rip as well? Ling Han was enraged. He had no intention of exposing his behind in public. Boom! The nine heavens flame turned into swords under the flame control technique and slashed madly at the two great emperor tiers. Even if Zai Bingyun's and Luo Changfeng's strength was extremely powerful, they would not be able to protect themselves entirely. This was a true celestial king technique, and added with it being a source power of heaven and earth, it was exceedingly powerful. Use your ultimate technique. Zai Bingyun forced out through gritted teeth. If this continued, it was possible that they would be bared first instead of Ling Han. This naturally could not be allowed. Luo Changfeng gritted his teeth, and then suddenly delivered a palm strike onto his chest. Suddenly, blood spurted from his mouth. However, he stretched out a finger and drew a circle, and the blood floated as if it had turned into swimming fish. This blood flickered with light, then rapidly evaporated, and was absorbed by the arm guards. Then, the originally golden arm guards became even brighter. Multiple flashes of light spread out, turning into an incredibly complex symbol. Luo Changfeng's whole person had become considerably weaker. Limited by his cultivation level, these arm guards could release severing mundane tier-level battle prowess at most, but now he had sacrificed a mouthful of blood essence, yet had increased the might of the arm guards further to a new level. On the other side, Zai Bingyun's expression was also grim. Multiple symbols lit up on her body, and a half-transparent precious sword emerged from her chest. This was the might of her ethereal divine fetus. Under her stimulation, in which she spared no expense, a great amount of gray hair appeared at her hairline. Her life force had been greatly expended, but she had ultimately summoned the ethereal divine sword. What was a divine fetus? That was one that possessed some celestial king-tier technique, but because their cultivation level was not there yet, they would have to pay an extremely high price if they wanted to use this technique. But now it was either you that would become naked or me, and the two great emperor tiers naturally would not have the slightest bit of hesitation left. You had best be the one to become naked. Go! Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng simultaneously released their strongest attack, which blasted towards Ling Han. Pung! As the attack surged past, the brilliant light instantly concealed Ling Han completely. After flashing blindingly for at least a breath's time, it finally dimmed. This could possibly be the most unusual battle in history. 3 great emperor tiers were giving their all just to make their opponent naked. If this was made public, it was possible that no one would believe it. The greater possibility would that everyone would be laughing their heads off. Ling Han appeared, exposing his fair, naked body as well as bloodstains. Thankfully, because of these bloodstains, Ling Han managed to save his modesty. After all, that was the might released from a celestial king-tier tool and a divine fetus, and even one with Ling Han's physique had still been wounded. Both Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were dumbfounded. Of course, they were not stunned by the majestic size of a certain part of Ling Han's body, but rather that this guy had just suffered a slight injury, and then that was that. This was a fatal area. Where did you wear your blood dragon armor? The two of them searched earnestly, but they could not find the presence of the blood dragon armor at all. It could be worn inside one's clothes, but it was impossible that it was still invisible when one was completely bare. You are definitely not human. Meanwhile, bewitching maiden Ro wanted very much to cover her face, though it was Ling Han's behind that was turned towards her. For elites like them, their divine sense could completely be used like eyes. Wherever their divine sense had swept, they naturally would be able to see very clearly. Though she was the holy daughter of the purity sect, and her strength was in charm techniques, she had never had any intimate contact with any man before. What more seeing a man completely bare and naked as the day he was born? Ling Han took out some clothes, but did not have the time to put them on. He directly tied them at his waist. It was enough for them to temporarily conceal him. He glared at Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng, enraged to the extreme. They actually dared to force him to run naked. Die! Ling Han pounced out and launched an offensive against Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng. This time, Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were really incapable of holding up to it. They had already used a powerful move, and now was precisely their weakest time. How could they hold up to this furious counterattack from Ling Han? Furthermore, Ling Han was similarly just targeting their clothes, and that was definitely even harder to defend than their bodies. Pieces of fabric flew everywhere, and Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng very soon followed in Ling Han's footsteps, becoming completely bare and naked. Luo Changfeng was still better off. After all, he was a man. Yet Zai Bingyun felt like she was about to die of shame. Right in front of 4 people, and 2 of them were men, at that multiple holes were torn in her clothes, and her body was completely exposed to the extreme. However, this was far from the only thing she had to worry about. She had worn the blood dragon armor inside her clothes. That was because she wanted to look beautiful, and wearing the blood dragon armor outside her clothes would affect aesthetic senses. But whether it was used as outer armor or inner armor, this armor was now covered with holes, and its protective effects had already vanished. She could clearly feel a murderous aura hovering around her, restless around where the holes were, but because the blood dragon armor still had some effect, she was able to withstand it for the moment, yet her time was definitely limited. Retreat. Without the slightest hesitation, Zai Bingyun immediately turned around to flee. If she had lost even her life, then what was the point of the heavenly Dao Jade? Even if she wanted revenge, she would still have to be alive to do that. She was very self-centered, completely unconcerned with Luo Chongfeng's survival. She was very decisive and determined when she turned to flee, as if it had not been the two of them who had just fought together on the same side. Humph! How could Ling Han possibly allow her to do as she pleased? Even if he didn't kill Luo Chongfeng this time round, he was determined to kill Zai Bingyun. Without ridding the world of this cruel and vicious demoness, his heart would never be at peace again. Chapter 1828 Killed. Chapter 1828 Killed. Luo Chongfeng was undergoing a fierce conflict of thoughts. Should he run? If he wanted to flee, this was the best time. Even Zai Bingyun was already at the end of her line, but for the sake of survival, one was always capable of exploding with endless fighting spirit, so no matter what, she would still be able to hold on for a period of time, which was enough time for him to flee. But the moment he left, the heavenly Dao Jade would definitely fall into Ling Han's hands. However, it was only a mere instant, and he had made his decision. He turned around and fled. That was because he and Zai Bingyun had not been able to kill Ling Han even in their prime condition. So what would grant him the ability to do it now? More importantly, Ling Han was practically a monster. He was actually not affected in this mystery realm. Shua, a sword light slashed out, blocking his way. It was the Empress. Though bewitching Maiden Ro was willing to step out for Ling Han, she had done so more out of a kind of righteousness and to repay his favor. But to ask her to intersect and kill the holy son of a celestial king-tier sect? She wouldn't dare to. Once either Luo Chongfeng or Zai Bingyun died here, it was still fine if the murder was known, as the matter would be simply resolved by having them pay for it with their lives. But if there were no eyewitnesses, then it was not impossible that a celestial king-tier force would erase all those involved in the matter in their great fury. Moreover, if it was because she moved that had led to Luo Chongfeng's death, even the purity sect would be destroyed. Trying to speak reason with a celestial king-tier force? How was it supposed to be done, and who would listen? Thus, she merely stood on the sidelines. Luo Chongfeng's eyes swept over the Empress, and he said, "Come with me, and I can fight for you to become a holy daughter of our sect." Shua, the Empress shot out another flash of sword chi. This was her answer. Luo Chongfeng did not have the slightest bit of delusions left. He delivered a palm strike towards the Empress, and his figure rapidly moved. At this moment, escape was his priority. The Empress humphed and sent out all 9 doppelgangers. Then, she summoned 100 fiery battle beasts. She used the unique environment of this place to strengthen her own battle prowess, so that she could stand against a 3rd Severance peak stage Emperor tier. This was just barely enough. But it was not a problem for her to temporarily fight Luo Chongfeng. After all, he was presently in a weak condition. However, even so, with the added factor of the Celestial King tier tool, one punch from Luo Chongfeng was enough to destroy a battle beast, showing his invincibility. Thankfully, the environment here was unique. Even if one battle beast was destroyed, it only meant that she had to reform it. There was enough fire element here, and added with the flame control technique, it meant that the Empress had an endless supply of power. The Empress's strategy was also incredibly clear, and that was detaining Luo Chongfeng. When Ling Han finished on his side, he naturally would come and erase the latter from existence. Bewitching Maiden Ro's heart beat madly as she watched. An indescribable coldness rose up in her, but she also felt an excitement that could not be put into words. Killing the holy son and heiress of a celestial king tier force. Just how outrageously brazen was this? But just how fulfilling would that feel? Ling Han's eyes were set on Zai Bingyun. He had already drawn the divine demon sword and had similarly formed 10 battle beasts. After advancing into the third severance, the strength of these battle beasts had also improved greatly. Each one was no weaker than Zai Bingyun. What more when there were 10 of them? Additionally, there was Ling Han, as well as 2 great source powers of heaven and earth, and the divine demon sword, and with all these together, how could they be anything that Zai Bingyun, who was at the end of her line, could withstand? If you kill me, you will definitely be hunted down by the elites of our Zai clan. If you offend a celestial king-tier force, even if you flee to the corners of the earth, there is no way for you to escape. Zai Bingyun threatened. Even in this kind of situation, she did not beg to be spared. Ling Han ignored her. He had already sworn that he would definitely eliminate this inhumane woman. Zai Bingyun tried her best. If it was anyone else, she might still be able to succeed. However, Ling Han's physique was extremely tough, so even if she put her life on the line, he was not afraid. No matter how vicious and fierce her blows were, they would only cause him superficial injuries at most. Her eyes involuntarily became fierce. If she really was to die here, she would definitely drag Ling Han down with her. Zai Bingyun's body trembled and suddenly became transparent. That was because the blood dragon armor she was wearing had already been largely damaged. Thus, one could clearly see through to the organs under her skin through these holes. Then her whole figure became transparent, as if she was about to disappear from the spot she was standing. Ling Han's sword slashed out, but she did not dodge or evade. Instead, she picked up speed and pounced towards Ling Han, her arms spread wide open. Pooh! The divine demon's sword penetrated her body, but a vicious expression appeared on Zai Bingyun's face. Her arms closed around and tightly wrapped around Ling Han. In the eyes of outsiders, the scene was very erotic. A man and woman were embracing each other in a very intimate manner, both disheveled. Whoever saw this would probably let their imagination roam, wouldn't they? But in truth, there was not the slightest bit of romance between the two of them, only endless killing intent. Multiple symbols appeared on Zai Bingyun's delicate body. This was her true greatest move, and was also the last greatest move. By exploding her divine fetus, she would die together with her enemy. Being tightly trapped in her arms, Ling Han couldn't even enter into the Black Tower and could only take this blow head-on. Void storm! Zai Bingyun spat out these words softly, and her whole person exploded with a boom, turning into a frightening storm of regulations. Ling Han bore the brunt of it, and instantly felt like his body was about to be torn apart. However, his physique was too tough. After advancing into the third severance, it had almost reached the level of 3-star pseudo-divine metal. With a cold humph, he channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. With his direct channeling, his defenses were instantly increased to terrifying heights. He would probably be able to withstand the blow of a Yin Soul elite. Zai Bingyun was putting her life on the line again, but she was merely in the third severance peak stage. No matter how much of a king among kings she was, she might not be able to break through the line of dividing soul tier. What more matching the battle prowess of a Yin Soul elite? Boom! The space storm raged madly, but Ling Han stood there like a mountain. Zai Bingyun's whole person was turning into regulations. After this full power attack, she, too, would die and become a part of the heaven and earth. An expression of disbelief appeared on her face. This attack was actually completely ineffective against Ling Han. She had already put her life on the line, so couldn't he at least sustain some severe injuries? But she couldn't do anything else anymore. Like a porcelain object, her delicate figure was breaking apart piece by piece, and her spirit was also shattering along with it, to disappear with the winds. Ling Han felt neither joy nor grief. Killing someone was never an action that could bring one joy, but if he did not kill Zai Bingyun, he would not be able to apologize to the innocent tribe of dwarves that had died. He looked towards Luo Changfeng. Since he had already killed, he did not mind killing a few more people. When Luo Changfeng felt Ling Han's eyes on him, he felt as if all his hair was raised on ends. With a battle cry, he tried to break out of the siege at all costs. He definitely could not allow Ling Han to catch up to him, or he would be following in Zai Bingyun's footsteps. As the holy son of a celestial king tier sect, he would definitely become an ascending origin tier in Futurian fact. He even had a chance of becoming a celestial king, so how could he die here? Now that he was using all his might, the Empress was immediately no longer able to block him, and allowed Luo Changfeng to break out of the siege. However, he had also paid the price by being wounded by a considerable number of battle beasts. However, at this moment he no longer cared. Ling Han used Luo Changfeng and set out to chase down Luo Changfeng. An expression of humiliation and fury appeared on Luo Changfeng's face. In his eyes, Ling Han was just a piece of trash, yet he was actually being hunted by this piece of trash now, which made him feel incredibly humiliated. He only had to leave this mystery realm. He swore in his heart. Ling Han had two source powers of heaven and earth. In fact, he could possibly obtain the heavenly Dao Jade as well. He would definitely not allow the latter to swagger out. He had to ask the elites of the sect to move out, suppress Ling Han, and snatch all his great opportunities away from him. Crackle! Crackle! Lightning exploded from his entire body. The natural lightning physique showed its might, and his speed was as fast as light. Chapter 1829 Prostration. Chapter 1829 Prostration. Ling Han used lightning flash. His speed was similarly astonishing, and he pursued Luo Changfeng closely. Both of them moved as fast as lightning. With a crackle, blazing white lightning flashed, the sight astonishing. Banish! Ling Han stretched out his right hand and pressed it down on Luo Changfeng. Luo Changfeng suddenly felt a coldness that caused his hair to stand on end. He gritted his teeth, and the flash of lightning on his body, actually quickly became slightly stronger than before, and he attained another burst of speed, increasing slightly in an inconceivable manner, and he was actually faster than this strike from Ling Han. Banish instantly hit empty air. Ling Han also appeared slightly surprised. This natural lightning physique was really quite amazing. Even with that, Luo Changfeng still managed to dodge. Before this, only that mutated celestial medicine had been able to do so, and that was because that thing had grown through absorbing lightning regulations. Let me give it a try too. As Ling Han pursued, the lightning regulations that he had obtained through absorbing the celestial medicine surged in his heart. Before this, he had only used celestial medicines to interweave and form a resonance with the heaven and earth, and rapidly comprehend Tao through that, allowing himself to push open the doors to the third severance. He had not managed to refine the two types of regulations that were contained in the celestial medicine itself. He still had some time to cram. That was because Ling Han had already refined these regulations. 3 days underneath the reincarnation tree meant 300 years of comprehending Tao, which was enough time to refine these regulations. However, while he had refined them, he had not put them to use yet, nor did he know how he should go about using them. As he experienced it, Z, lightning flashed madly. Actually, Ling Han was the most familiar with lightning regulations. That was because long since he had been in the small world, he had frequently shattered his own form and spirit to be tempered by divine lightning, and observe heaven's might in the meantime, turning it into his own power. Afterwards, he had obtained the 9 heavens flame, and had further retrieved the Xianin source water. So there were 2 source powers inside his body, which was equivalent to having 2 celestial kings constantly teaching him great Tao without reservations at all times. He naturally became more inclined towards these 2 aspects. But this did not mean that his comprehension in terms of lightning regulations was inferior. On the other hand, he had created a considerable number of mystical powers through lightning regulation. She couldn't have drunk so much heavenly tribulation fluid for nothing after all, right? Thus, when the lightning regulations of the celestial medicine surged through his mind, and after he analyzed them, they rapidly turned into his own understanding. It should be known that this celestial medicine was the most proficient in fleeing, and its speed was higher than even the large black dog's. However, the large black dog was still well versed in instant teleportation, and only then did he manage to cut it off. The true extreme speed of lightning. Ling Han's eyes glowed and then turned a blazing white in color. It was like even his eyeballs were formed from lightning. Successively, his whole body flashed madly with lightning, and his figure also began to speed up. Pa, 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 wherever he passed, lightning would be left behind in the air and crackled loudly. He had acquired a new lightning flash, celestial technique. Then, Luo Changfeng shockingly discovered that Ling Han was rapidly closing the distance between them. He was so astonished that he almost spat his tongue out of his mouth. It should be known that this was a mystical power that had been nurtured naturally by his natural lightning physique. Even he could not maintain this kind of extreme speed for a very long time. It could not be helped. His cultivation level was limited, and he could only unleash so much power. But this was already incredibly awesome, and he was sure that no one could match him in the severing, mundane tier. But in Ling Han's case, this was no longer matching him, but rather surpassing him. Could it be that this guy also possessed lightning element source power aside from the two source powers of fire and water? Could you be even more freakish? His scalp was numb, but Ling Han was getting closer and closer. He was just a small distance away from being in his scope of attack. Luo Changfeng humphed and said, Ling Han, you have killed Zai Bingyin, and will definitely suffer being hunted down by a celestial king tier force. If you further offend our Thundercloud Palace, you will not have the slightest sliver of survival left. Ling Han laughed loudly. You speak as if your Thundercloud Palace would spare me if I did not hunt you down. I do not have a deadly enmity with you. Luo Changfeng persuaded. Ling Han scoffed and said, Do you take me for an idiot? You have already found out that I possess two source powers, and would also obtain the heavenly Dao Jade later. With your greed, can you spare me? I can just guess that once I leave this mystery realm, you will definitely have the elites from the Thundercloud Palace come and deal with me. Luo Changfeng's heart clenched. He had indeed been thinking that. How could that be? I swear on my reputation. However, he thought was one matter, but he would definitely not admit it. Ling Han shook his head. Luo Changfeng, you are inferior to even a woman. Though Zai Bingyin should have died 10,000 times over, she at least had some backbone. Faced with death, she had only chosen to fight, unlike you who are close to prostration. Luo Changfeng flew into a sudden fury. He was the holy son of the Thundercloud Palace, and usually it would only be others prostrating in front of him. Ling Han, you are digging your own grave, he shouted loudly. Don't think that just because you have the 9 heavens flame and the Xianin source water you can look down on every being in this world. You are only in 3rd severance, and any dividing soul tier would be able to easily suppress you. If a dividing soul tier directly came into contact with a source power, that would definitely mean death. But facing a 3rd severance, a dividing soul tier elite could just crush him with a palm strike from afar. So how could they possibly allow Ling Han the chance to approach them? Ling Han laughed. Luo Changfeng, do you think that 2 great source powers are the trump cards that allow my arrogance? His trump card was the Black Tower. At least a dividing soul tier or even a mortal palace tier could not possibly discover a clue of it. Luo Changfeng couldn't help but pause, and an incredibly strong coldness suddenly surged up in his heart. If even 2 source powers weren't Ling Han's trump cards, then what was his real trump card? In this world, Was there anything stronger than a source power? The only thing that Luo Changfeng could think of was a celestial king. But how could Ling Han be bringing a celestial king with him everywhere he went? Wasn't that a joke? But no matter how he looked at it, Ling Han did not seem to be an idiot. The latter clearly knew that he would not end well if he killed both himself and Zai Bingyun, but he had still made his move without any reservations and hunted them down without any scruples. "You, who exactly are you?" This time Luo Changfeng was really shocked and felt that even the Thundercloud Palace could not give him any sense of security. "You guess," Ling Han said smilingly. All of a sudden, innumerable thoughts streaked through Luo Changfeng's heart. There were 9 heavens to the celestial king tier, and each level brought one closer to ascending the heavens. This was not just mere empty words. Even if they were both celestial king tier sects, how could one that was created by a first heaven celestial king compare to one that was established by a second heaven celestial king? There was a gap of who knew how much. The celestial king of the Thundercloud Celestial King was a first heaven celestial king. But even though he was the lowest level among celestial kings, a celestial king was still a celestial king, and he could reign for all eternity. As long as he was not deadly enemies with another celestial king, he would be an eternal existence. Could it be that Ling Han was the descendant of a second heaven or third heaven celestial king? In fact, even ninth heaven celestial king. If that was not the case, where would he have gotten such confidence from? Furthermore, what celestial king would bear to bestow 2 source powers of heaven and earth onto their disciple? Only a ninth heaven celestial king would, because he had already reached the ultimate apex. So even the source power of heaven and earth would not have the slightest significance for him any longer. He gritted his teeth and asked, "What if I agree to accept you as my master?" When he said these words, his heart was also squeezing painfully, and he felt as if his whole world had collapsed on him. The revered and prestigious Holy Son of the Thundercloud Palace actually took the initiative to beg to become someone else's lackey. Chapter 1830, Exposed Again. Chapter 1830, Exposed Again. To actually speak these words, putting aside the fact that Luo Changfeng felt his face burn, Ling Han was also slightly shocked. Fuck, was this guy really a holy son? He was too shameless, wasn't he? There were some things that could be done, and some things that could not. No one was willing to die, and Ling Han could understand that. He, too, feared death. But if it was for the sake of protecting his lovers and family, he would step out without the slightest hesitation. If it was for the sake of guarding his pride, he would also rather die than kneel. This was called having a backbone. As a holy son, and a holy son of a celestial king-tier sect at that, Luo Changfeng could actually prostrate himself to such an extent. This was the epitome of shamelessness. "You make me disgusted," Ling Han said. He sent out a palm strike. Luo Changfeng had already entered his scope of attack. Banish. Luo Changfeng's face was burning red, yet he was indifferent internally. As a mighty emperor tier, a rare divine fetus that would only appear once in millions and millions of years, how could he die in a tiny mystery realm? He had boundless prospects in his future, and the destination of his journey was the stars and universe. Fuck! His vision darkened, and he had already entered into a separate dimension. Luo Changfeng didn't know what had happened, and naturally paled in shock. He hurriedly unleashed his full power and began a mad barrage of attacks. Originally, this separate dimension could be maintained for about a breath's time, but under his furious blasting, it immediately shattered. Luo Changfeng charged out, and then saw an iron fist descending onto his face. This little bit of time was enough for Ling Han to catch up to him. Luo Changfeng was astonished, and hurriedly stretched out a fist to parry this blow. Pung! As the fist landed, his whole person was instantly sent into a drastic retreat. After his arm guards had been overused, his battle prowess had also fallen to rock bottom, and he was no longer able to match Ling Han. Ling Han did not let him off now that he was at the advantage, and shot out another punch. Pung! Luo Changfeng was again sent backwards, and this time he had even flown through the air. Ling Han used Lightning Flash to catch up to him. At present, this was the improved version of Lightning Flash. In an instant, he had caught up to Luo Changfeng, and then his fists showered down like rain. Pung! 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 The hard fists landed madly, and Luo Changfeng could only endure the barrage. Under the onslaught, his limbs were spread apart, and his whole body was trembling madly. He threw up blood like mad, and his chest very soon caved in under Ling Han's blows. And then his chest was punched through from the force. Blood spurted out, and his bones and organs were visible. Ling Han was unmoved, and when he sent out another punch, he had already condensed the 9 heavens' flame. Once this blow landed, Luo Changfeng would die without a doubt. By this time, Luo Changfeng had finally lost all hope and given up. He knew that it was impossible that Ling Han would spare him. His eyes suddenly bulged, and he released his final exclamation as he roared, "Then let us die together!" H.I.'s eyes were crying tears of blood, but they were immediately turned into ash by the lightning that was bursting out of his body. H.I.'s whole figure had become blazing white. He had lost his physical body, and instead turned into a ball formed completely of lightning. Natural lightning physique, divine fetus, was actually formed by a section of celestial king tier regulations. And now, with his life as price, he had detonated Thu's portion of celestial king tier regulations. It was enough to kill any severing mundane tier. Luo Changfeng's face bore a twisted grin. If that was how it was, then he would just bring some company on his way to the underworld. Very foolish and naive. Ling Han shook his head. Didn't he see that Zai Bingyun had also exploded her own body? But what use was it against him? Are you even stronger than Zai Bingyun? Even if you are, just how much more powerful could you be? Boom! Lightning exploded, turning into a massive circular zone of explosive lightning. Bolts of lightning interwove closely together, destroying all life in that vicinity. Under this kind of shock wave, to say nothing of fourth severance, even a severing mundane tier, peak stage king tier, could be insta-killadevan if he had not been insta-killed. He would have to suffer severe injuries at least. How could the self-explosion of a divine fetus, as well as an emperor tier, be anything ordinary? However, when the lightning had wreaked enough havoc, Ling Han was still standing proudly. But what rendered him speechless was the fact that the clothes that he had just put on were again turned into nothing, and he was again completely naked. Luo Changfeng's body had already turned into ash, but his spirit had not completely dissipated. Before returning to the Tao of heaven and earth, he looked at Ling Han in defiance. Even such a blow wasn't able to make Ling Han sustain the slightest injury. Just what kind of monster are you exactly? In the end, he was still unable to ask the final question. His spirit dissipated and returned completely to the heaven and earth. Ling Han's eyes swept over the surroundings. At a very far distance, there were 3 people that were presently trembling with fear. When his eyes passed over them, the 3 of them immediately turned around and fled. Terror-stricken, they were fleeing at an extremely fast speed. Lin Fong, Tung Sun, Wei Nian, the 3 that had previously fled. Ling Han did not chase after them. Their distance was really too far, and those 3 were also king tiers, so how could they be caught up with so easily? Husband. The Empress arrived elegantly from afar and threw herself into his arms. Bewitching maiden Ro stood in the distance, feeling fire burning her pretty face. She was also speechless. In a single day, she had actually seen Ling Han naked twice. Was he doing it on purpose? Ling Han was also speechless. Who would have known that Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng would destroy his clothes, and then come over to embrace him before self-explosion, which again turned him naked. Did she think he wanted to look like this? However, my figure is actually extremely perfect, so it is to your advantage. Ling Han was embraced by the Empress, and didn't even have the time to put on any clothes. Thus, he could only enter into the Black Tower in a flash. In any case, this had to be only an ordinary spatial god tool in the eyes of bewitching Maiden Ro. The Empress offered a kiss. Her beloved was domineering and showed his might, causing her passion to ignite like fire. She did not care for the situation or location. If she liked something, she would show her emotions. Everything in this world was ants to her, so what need was there for her to be concerned about the thoughts of others? Having the Empress clinging on to him, and she was looking so alluring and seductive at that. Just ask, who would be able to resist such temptation? Ling Han naturally was no exception. Furthermore, he had no need to resist either. This was his wife, a woman he could justly, honorably, and boldly love. After a bout of intimacy, Ling Han and the Empress finally exited the Black Tower. Actually, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden had also joined them in the middle, and the preposterous eroticism that they had indulged in naturally could not be expressed to outsiders. In any case, Ling Han's legs had turned weak. After exiting the Black Tower, they saw that the mountain cave had still not opened, and Ling Han couldn't help but feel guilty. Don't worry, I will not take advantage of the opening to steal the treasure, bewitching Maiden Ro declared in irritation. Seeing how the Empress looked so astonishingly alluring despite maintaining her bearing of austerity, she knew what she and Ling Han had just been doing. This caused her face to flush red. Are you guys aware that there is another person here? Though I can't see you, I can feel that you are within the vicinity, so I would still feel embarrassed, all right? Ling Han smiled faintly. Even if bewitching Maiden Ro wanted to steal the treasure, she couldn't possibly do so either. That was because the heavenly Tao Jade was formed through the source power of Earth having evolved through millions and millions of years, and was not something that could be retrieved by a fourth severance at all. No matter what, she would have to possess celestial king tier techniques, like Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng. Otherwise, it would only result in her death. Ling Han definitely would not say this, though. He merely looked at that cave and thought that he had only indulged with the Empress for a single day this time round. It seemed like it could be ranked in the top 5 of the shortest periods of time that they had made love for. As expected, with something still lingering in his mind, he could not go all out. Seeing his distracted expression, bewitching Maiden Ro was almost exploding with fury. This was practically the largest stain in the history of the Purity sect. To actually be distracted while he was with her, and he was thinking of another woman at that. Could anyone bear that? In any case, she couldn't. Chapter 1831. Retrieving the Heavenly Tao Jade. Chapter 1831. Retrieving the Heavenly Tao Jade. After waiting for another day, the mountain cave finally opened. The rocks miraculously melted, revealing the passage of entry. The Heavenly Tao Jade was formed from the source power of Earth, so it was very ordinary that it possessed this kind of ability. On this day, Ling Han did a few things, such as plundering the spatial god tools that Luo Changfeng and Zai Bingyun had left behind. There was a considerable amount of good stuff inside. A descendant of a celestial king-tier force was indeed rich and imposing. Both the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ro stayed outside. They were not members of the race of dwarves, nor did they have any celestial king-tier techniques, so they could not possibly oppose the power of regulation of the heavenly Tao Jade. They could die very easily. Ling Han was protected by the 9 heavens flame. There was an abundance of fire element here, and added with the fact that he had cultivated the flame control technique, he could unleash the full might of the 9 heavens flame. It was not dark inside the mountain cave. Multiple stalactites were exuding a gentle light. The whole cave was not large. He had only walked half a mile, and there was already no further path ahead of him. A large rock that was flatter than the others stood out in front of him, and there were 2 infants that lay on it. They looked like they were just a few months old. They neither cried nor fussed, and when they realized Ling Han had entered, they both cast curious gazes at him as they surveyed him. Ling Han knew that these were dwarves that had been birthed from the heavenly Tao jade. He couldn't help but feel rueful. Ultimately, the race of dwarves had not gone extinct. He picked up the 2 infants and released all the corpses from the dwarves' village from the Black Tower with a wave of his hand. This would be the resting grounds of all the dwarves. After doing all this, he looked ahead. There was a stone pedestal which held a precious pearl. It was exuding a gentle light. Upon a closer look, that precious pearl was actually carved from jade, but the slightest signs of being carved could not be seen. It should be naturally shaped and formed by the powers of heaven and earth. Heavenly Tao jade! Small Tower spoke up, and there was actually a tremble in its voice. In this world, there is a pitifully small amount of heavenly Tao jade, and usually an epoch would be needed to truly nurture a single piece. In truth, from heavenly Tao source rock to heavenly Tao jade, this process only needed a few 100 million years, but the formation of the heavenly Tao source rock itself would need a very long time, and since that time was counted into the formation of the heavenly Tao jade, that naturally meant an incredibly prolonged period of time. Ling Han couldn't help but say, at first, celestial kings were also considered few and far between, but afterwards you said that there was an overwhelmingly large number of them. Could it be that in some celestial king tier sect, there would be as many as a pile of heavenly Tao jade too? Small Tower hesitated slightly, and then said, that is not impossible. Celestial kings had absolutely no limit to their lifespan. To say nothing of an epoch, they would be able to live for 100 or even 1,000 epochs. Then, in their extended lives, it was actually not very hard to understand that they had obtained more than one heavenly Tao jade. This is the confidence of a great sect, Small Tower said. For example, the Rock Palace. You seem to know a lot about the Rock Palace, Ling Han said in a questioning tone. Small Tower paused slightly and then said, if we come down to it, we have some relations with the Rock Palace as well. What? Ling Han was astonished, and thoughts streaked through his mind. Involuntarily, a shocked expression appeared on his face. Then the previous imperial empress having died in the lower realm is actually no coincidence. Hee, how could there be anything so coincidental in this world? Small Tower did not avoid the issue this time round, and it seemed like it wanted to let Ling Han know some secrets. What kind of force is the Rock Palace? Ling Han was curious now. 9th Heaven, Celestial King, Tier. Small Tower replied seriously. Ling Han felt hot blood rush through his veins, but then immediately frowned. But the previous Imperial Empress of Rock Palace has already died. There is another, Small Tower said smilingly, and that is the person that was called Old Witch. Ling Han almost spluttered. That old woman using a walking cane. Fuck, that was actually a 9th Heaven Celestial King. No wonder she was so awesome. Hang on, Ling Han hurriedly said. Why didn't that old witch discover your presence? Moreover, why didn't you acknowledge each other? If that hadn't been the case, he would not have to be separated from his parents, lovers, and son for so long. Small Tower slowly said, firstly, as long as you don't use the Black Tower right in front of a Celestial King, then even a 9th Heaven Celestial King couldn't possibly discover it. Secondly, before everything is clear, there is no one that could be fully trusted. Thirdly, if you had gone to the Celestial Realm early on, it would have been detrimental to your development. The path of a Heavenly Venerable Tier has always begun from a small world and all the way onwards. Just who exactly is the Heavenly Venerate that you speak of? Ling Han immediately pointed out. Since Small Tower said that their branch had some relation to the Rock Palace, this Heavenly Venerate's abilities had to be strong enough. Otherwise, how could he have had relations with a 9th Heaven Celestial King? There were 9 heavens in Celestial King tier, and every single step forwards was as difficult as ascending the heavens. How could that be a mere joke? Small Tower became silent again. After a while it finally said, "Stop blabbering nonsense, and retrieve the heavenly Tao, Jade, quickly. If you want to know more, first, you have to advance into the 5th severance, and second, quickly advance your cultivation level. With your present strength, you would only be seeking your own death if you knew too many secrets." Fuck, Utes under a tower. Ling Han looked ahead. This place was covered with the regulations of the Great Tao, and aside from the race of dwarves that was of the same origins as the heavenly Tao Jade, other beings would be immediately crushed by the regulations of the Great Tao once they entered into this place. However, if Ling Han ignited the 9 heavens flame, that would be enough to oppose it. This, similarly, was a source power of heaven and earth. Strictly speaking, the heavenly Tao Jade was no longer a source power of heaven and earth. It had already evolved from being a source power of heaven and earth and become a different object. Small Tower has said before that every elemental source power of heaven and earth could only be maintained at the apex number of 9, such as the 9 great ancestral flames. Before an ancestral flame had vanished, it was impossible for an ancestral flame to be born. But heavenly Tao, Jade, was different. There could be many of them because it was not a source power of heaven and earth. Refining the heavenly Tao Jade could not form the source power of earth inside one's body, and could only compensate for the regrets that one had experienced in the path of cultivation before, and open a path towards becoming a supreme monarch tier, for a flawless emperor tier. Though this path would be a very, very narrow escape. Ling Han strode forwards. When he had gotten to a specific distance, the heavenly Tao Jade shone, and the light was so intense that it seemed like a sun. The ripple of regulations became even stronger, wanting to forcibly erase Ling Han. Unfortunately, this kind of power of regulation was removed from cultivation level, so Ling Han was completely able to use 9 heavens flame to resist it. Essentially, they were both source powers of heaven and earth, so neither was inferior to the other. Furthermore, if 1 9 heavens flame was not enough, he still had the Xianin source water. Ling Han did not draw upon the Xianin source water, because 9 heavens flame was enough to match it. However, his speed slowed down considerably. Still, he had finally still managed to reach the stone pedestal. He stretched out a hand to grab the heavenly Tao Jade, which he then later stored into the Black Tower. Smoothly and without a hitch. Amazing. 1. The whole mountain cave fluctuated, and a change that was indiscernible to the naked eye took place. Ling Han knew that from now onwards, it was impossible for the tribe of dwarves to be birthed from this place in future. The 2 infant dwarves that he was presently holding would be the last descendants of this tribe. He had to think of some way for them to blend in with the normal humans, marry, and give birth to the next generation. Ling Han was confident that he could change the fates of these 2. Small Tower, is this heavenly Tao Jade considered big or small? Ling Han asked, slightly anticipatory. He did not want to benefit alone from a treasure. It was best if the Empress could share the benefits with him. If possible, he also planned to bring a little for Hunyo. However, the Rock Palace was a supreme sect that even possessed natural peach seal, so perhaps they did not just have a single heavenly Tao Jade, either. Small Tower humphed and said, "This heavenly Tao Jade is not to be used by 2 people. Ah, Ling Han was instantly extremely disappointed. It is enough for 3 to use. Small Tower added. Chapter 1832. Who is the bad influence? Chapter 1832. Who is the bad influence? 3 people. Ling Han was at first stunned, which was followed by great joy. This damn Small Tower actually caused him a moment of needless worry. After the pleasant surprise had passed, he couldn't help but feel curious and asked, "Didn't you say that the heavenly Tao Jade can only allow 2 people to refine it at most? If you think that 3 people is too many, you can throw away whatever's left," Small Tower said very shamelessly. "Fine, then it's your win." Ling Han shook his head as he headed back outside, each arm holding an infant. Actually, the infants of the race of dwarves were not small. They were basically the same size as the adult dwarves. Clearly, they would not grow any further once they were born. Is there any way for them to become normal humans? Ling Han asked Small Tower. You are truly ignorant, Small Tower scoffed. The reason why this race is so small in build is because they do not cultivate. Once their cultivation level increases, their build would naturally grow bigger, so what need is there for you to worry about them? Right? He was again looked down on. Ling Han rubbed his chin in self-reflection. Was there any time that he would not be looked down on by Small Tower? No, definitely not. This Sundra Tower seemed to take joy in striking him down. Sigh, he had really never seen this kind of precious tool. It was really too disrespectful to its master. Ha! Well, I'm so sorry, Small Tower said with a fake smile while using a tone that would incite irritation. Ling Han could confirm that Small Tower and the large black dog had to be bad friends. Even the way they threw out mocking remarks was similar. This also made him feel curious. Just what kind of character was the master of the Tower of Three Realms to be able to create a tool spirit like Small Tower? Had the large black dog also been badly influenced by that person? Seeing Ling Han carry out two infants, both bewitching Maiden Ro and the Empress were surprised. You had gone in to retrieve treasure, but why had you carried two little precious out? Ling Han briefly explained the situation, and only then did the two women know that these were the last descendants of the race of dwarves. Let's leave this place. The three of them went back in the direction they had come from, and this place had also completed its mission. Perhaps it would return to being ordinary not long after. Regarding the heavenly Dao Jade, Ling Han only told the Empress. This precious jade could be used by three people, and bewitching Maiden Ro had indeed shared in the tough and easy times with them. But to allow her to take a share in the heavenly Dao Jade just for that, Ling Han had to admit that he could not bring himself to do it. Their relations were not as good as that. Unfortunately, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had not advanced into the severing mundane tier yet. Otherwise, she could use the heavenly Dao Jade as foundation to make up for the previous imperfections. Then, even if she did not strike the heaven and earth, she would be able to forcibly reverse the circumstances. For the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to take this step, she would need at least 100 million years at least. Even if Ling Han gave her celestial medicines to consume every day, it could not possibly shrink down the time too much. The step from mortality to immortality was really, really too hard. It was the true deciding factor that would differentiate king tiers, prodigies, and normal people. A day later, they had arrived at the ascending dragon palace. There was nothing stopping their way. They exited the palace, and that massive volcano once again appeared ahead of them. Black smoke was wafting from it, and the smell of sulfur was everywhere in the air around them. The two infants had naturally been sent into the Black Tower. Coincidentally, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was very bored, so giving her two babies to take care of would help her pass some time. I will definitely repay your life-saving debt. Bewitching Maiden Ro said to Ling Han, slightly indignant. This guy actually ignored her charms their whole way here, causing her to doubt herself. Was she really a great bewitching maiden that would cause chaos in the world? However, Ling Han was too dangerous. Not only had he killed the descendants of two celestial king tier forces, most importantly, witnesses were left alive after that. She did not dare to mingle too closely with Ling Han, or she, too, would be attacked. If a celestial king tier force made a move, what was the purity sect worth? Thus, she definitely had to draw a clear dividing line. Ling Han smiled slightly and casually tossed a jade vial over. Pa! Bewitching Maiden Ro caught it and asked, "What is this?" "Tea leaves," Ling Han replied casually, and wrapped an arm around the Empress's slender waist as they continued onwards. The Empress, meanwhile, was a little displeased. That was a 9 revolutions charm physique, and her husband should have snatched her over as his bed partner so that he could increase his cultivation level. Why should she be allowed to benefit another? But since Ling Han was so insistent, she was not willing to resist Ling Han's wishes either. In any case, the lifespan of a cultivator was prolonged, and there would come a chance eventually even if bewitching Maiden Ro really did marry. Couldn't they still kidnap the bride? She thought without the slightest concern. There was nothing that she dared not do in this world. So what if it was a celestial king? Sooner or later, she, too, would be able to ascend to this cultivation level and challenge all the strongest in this world. Bewitching Maiden Ro almost smashed the vial in her hand into the back of Ling Han's head. Though she admitted that Ling Han had saved her life, she had also helped Ling Han and the Empress afterwards. No matter what, it could be considered they had stuck together in hard times, and now they had obtained some kind of precious treasures, but actually used a vial of tea leaves to dismiss her. How could anyone do that? However, she ultimately did not throw it. If she did, wouldn't it be a bigger loss to her? She would really end up completely empty-handed. Just wait. She would immediately steep these tea leaves, and then drink the tea down in front of Ling Han to vent her ire. She only had to open the lid of the vial, and she would realize how very precious this vial of tea leaves was. They were tea leaves that had been sprouted from the mother tree of the heaven and earth. Though its effects were slightly weaker at present, it was definitely a precious treasure to any severing mundane tear. Ling Han had no intention to clarify matters. From a certain aspect, he was also mischievous. He and the Empress advanced towards that gigantic volcano. With the 9 heavens flame and flame control technique Ling Han had grasped, not only did he want to obtain even more blood dragon stones, he also had a sliver of curiosity. Just what kind of story did that celestial king have? Because it had taken a long amount of time for him to retrieve the heavenly Tao Jade, Ling Han and the Empress were seriously left behind. They could not see a single person in their surroundings, and the blood dragon stones along their way had naturally all been collected by others. It was practically impossible for any to be left. Ling Han and the Empress did not have that in mind either. Their target was that volcano, and they were resolute to do something big. Bewitching Maiden Ro did not fall too far behind them, because she, too, wanted to go to that volcano. The reason was very simple. She, too, had cultivated the flame control technique. However, because she did not have the Black Tower, the time she had cultivated for was naturally short, and her grasp of the flame control technique was far from being comparable to that of Ling Han and the Empress. But even so, she was still able to advance much further than others. One could not just walk around here completely unreserved, even with the blood dragon armor. The closer one got to the volcano, the more frightening the fire element of heaven and earth would be. Even the blood dragon armor could not fully protect them. After over a dozen days, they arrived at a canyon. This was the area that was closest to the volcano. If they went on further, even the blood dragon armor would melt. This canyon was astonishingly huge. It was said that this was also a very precious site. Among the areas that everyone could enter, the blood dragon stones in this canyon numbered the most. Most people would stay a good few years here and search for blood dragon stones every day. Moreover, the canyon was also a natural barrier. There was an underground stream here, which effectively decreased the invasion of fire element, largely extending the lifespan of the blood dragon armor. Thus, even if a considerable number of people would search for blood dragon stones outside the canyon, they would still come back here every once in a while so that their blood dragon armor could rest for a while. When Ling Han and the Empress arrived at this canyon, they saw that this place was like a marketplace, and there were extraordinarily many people here. As they entered into the canyon, a group of 5 just happened to walk out of the canyon. Both sides paused. That was because those 5 people just happened to be Fu Gaoyun and his followers, as well as Fu Xiaorun and Situ Xiaojin. Chapter 1833, Revenge. Chapter 1833, Revenge. Be brother Ling. Fu Gaoyan looked at Ling Han, his expression very strange. To say nothing of him, the expressions on Ching Zhong and the others' faces weren't much better, either. That was because Ling Han's head was presently completely bald. He had lost even his brows. That appearance naturally was very disharmonious, no matter how they looked. Ling Han rubbed his bald head and gritted his teeth. He had forgotten about this, and now? Great, his image was completely ruined. Hee, how are your profits? He asked, changing the topic. Bratling, is your A*** all right? Situ Xiaojin asked with some concern. Ling Han almost threw up a mouthful of blood. Only my head has gone bald. So why are you so concerned about my A***? Do the two have any relation between them? What kind of leaping thought process do you have here? Fu Xiaoyan could only flush bright red and pretend she had not heard. She really was completely helpless about this Situ Xiaojin, whose thoughts were filthy to the extreme. Thankfully, Fu Gaoyan piped up at the right moment and said, "Not too bad." The volcanic eruption this time was extremely ferocious, and there are more blood dragon stones than the previous few times. Our luck wasn't too bad. We encountered a bountiful year. Ling Han, why have you arrived only now? Ching Zhong asked, though the two of them had already clarified their relationship. Seeing Fu Gaoyan being so cordial, he could only open his mouth and show some concern. Ling Han smiled and said, I was held back by some matters. He had no intention of showing off. Immediately, Cheng Zhong's expression became prideful. Even traveling here was a bumpy road for you? You were really quite inferior. Isn't this Ling Han? Another voice rang out, and Bei Xianming walked over, his arms crossed behind his back. Meanwhile, a few people tailed behind him, and one of them stood out the most, seeming like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed. Though Bei Xianming was a holy son, and was furthermore clearly the leader of these few people, his limelight was completely stolen by this person. He was a fourth Severance peak stage, and had settled in this cultivation level for who knew how many years, tempering his battle prowess to an incredibly frightening extent, and only then could he show off so much strength. How outrageously bold! Having offended the heiress of a celestial king-tier clan, you actually still dare to appear so bravely here. I really have no idea where your courage comes from. Bei Xuanming's expression was filled with mockery. He had been waiting a very long time for this day to come. Ling Han looked at him as if he was looking at a clown. Do you want to know just how bold I can be? Foolish clown, you won't be able to make trouble for too many days more. Once Celestial Maiden Zai encounters you, she will definitely take your life. Bei Xianming scoffed, then swept his eyes over Fu Xiaoyan and said, Fu Xiaoyan, you gave me up just for the sake of this piece of trash? Are you regretting it now? Fu Xiaoyan's expression was filled with disdain. The reason why she was not willing to marry Bei Xianming was not because she had fallen for another, but purely because she had seen through the true character of Bei Xianming. He was the type to avenge every slightest fault, and did not have any tolerance at all. How could this kind of man be worthy of her? She didn't bother to pay him any attention, either. She only pursed her lips slightly and pretended that this person in front of her was empty air. Bei Xianming couldn't help but feel his anger rise when he was given the cold shoulder, but being wary of Fu Gaoyan, he did not make a move. However, Fu Gaoyan had given all the slots of entry to his subordinates, and actually did not bring an elite with him. This was really too stupid. Bei Xianming turned around and asked that showy person, Shaolin, are you getting an itch in your fists? The person broke into a grin and asked, Whom does Lord Holy Sun want me to thrash? There, those few of them. Bei Xianming pointed in the direction of Fu Gaoyan. This ex-brother-in-law of his had always looked down on him, and he had worked earnestly on gaining his favor for nothing. And now, Since the betrothal was over in any case, he should teach him a harsh lesson and vent his anger. Revenge. To say nothing of the fact that he would not enter into the Fu clan's territory after this at all, even if they would occasionally have relations. With the prestige of the lunar sect, what could the Fu clan do to him? It was fine as long as there was no fatality. That showy person's name was he Shaolin. He looked towards Fu Gaoyan with a slightly disdainful smile and said, "You all can join forces against me. It will save me some energy as I can deal with all of you in one go." Fu Gaoyun and the others were furious. However, the Fu clan itself had this kind of strange genius. They clearly knew how formidable this kind of strange genius could be. So how could they dare to seek their own humiliation? They all forcibly suppressed their anger. Hu asked Fu Gaoyan not to have brought a single strange genius of this sort with him to save on the entry places. "What is it? You don't dare to even make your move?" He Shaolin scoffed with a disdainful grin. "And you call yourself an heir of the Fu clan? You are practically a spineless coward. You are a fourth severance peak stage, and you can actually bring yourself to challenge us like this?" Fu Shaoyan couldn't bear having her brother be mocked like this, and stretched out a hand to rebuke him. Weak is weak. What excuse is there to be found? He Shaolin asked coldly, could it be that cultivation was thrown down by the gods on him? It was he himself that had cultivated with much toil and difficulty. Fu Gaoyan lowered his hand in a pressing motion, signaling to his sister not to be rash. He darkly declared, "I will admit defeat this time. In the outside world, who would really have a just battle with you? Power was might. Who asked Bei Xianming to have the might now? Let's go." He waved a hand, planning to leave with his party. What is it? Planning to leave with just a few words? Bei Xianming couldn't help but smirk coldly. Don't you know the rules? Since you have admitted defeat, you have to leave something behind. Fu Gaoyun gritted his teeth and raised his right hand. Pa! He slashed down with a palm strike, and blood spattered in all directions. His left arm had been severed. "Brother!" Fu Shaoyan exclaimed in shock. Yet Fu Gaoyan did not even cast a look at her, and only set his eyes on Bei Xianming. "Is that enough?" Bei Xianming laughed loudly. This idiot. Previously, he had curried favor with him, and he had not cared for it. And now, he had finally suffered the consequences of his own actions. However, did he think that that was the end of the matter? Since Bei Xianming had started this matter, it was natural that courage had given rise to his evil intentions. He coldly declared, "Not enough." This time, even Qingzhong and the others felt unbridled fury. He said it was not enough even with having one arm severed. Then what more did he want? Bei Xianming set his eyes on Fu Shaoyan, and his lips quirked, showing a vicious expression. "Fu Shaoyan, the reason for this scene today is all because of you. Since that is the case, whoever started the trouble should end it. What do you want?" Fu Shaoyan bit her lip tightly. "Take off your clothes," Bei Xianming stated calmly. "Let everyone admire your beautiful figure." He had already dismissed the thought of marrying Fu Shaoyan, and once a man was intent on revenge, he would sometimes be even more malicious than any woman, and Bei Xianming was precisely the kind of man. Fu Xiaoyan's face instantly turned pale. To be completely naked in public, what face would she have to see others in future? Even if she eventually became a celestial king in future, this would become a humiliation that would never be erased. Sidu Xiaojin was the first to lose control and immediately leaped out and said, "Are you fuck still a man? Come on then, if you have the guts, come and rape me. See if I won't squeeze you to death." At first, Ling Han planned to make a move to get them out of the dilemma, but hearing such formidable words from her, the muscle in his cheek involuntarily twitched madly. Thankfully, old Situ Tang was not here. Otherwise, if he had heard these words, he would probably spit out a mouthful of blood, killed by his towering fury. Even Bei Xianming gritted his teeth. Even if someone gave him courage, he would not dare to rape the granddaughter of a 3-star alchemist. He waved a hand and said, "Shaolin, since Miss Fu is unwilling to save her brother, then just beat them all into submission." "Understood, Lord Holy Sun." He Shaolin slightly bowed. He knew that Bei Xuanming's future accomplishments would definitely be above his, and thus displayed much respect. Then he turned a sinister look on Fu Gaoyun and his group. Chapter 1834, Audacious. Chapter 1834, Audacious. He Shaolin wasn't a king tier, so he more so desired to crush King Tier's under his feet. This could be regarded as the most mesmerizing sensation in the world. His expression was haughty as he gazed at Fu Gaoyun, and he would definitely crush Fu Gaoyun's face under his feet today. Even if Fu Gaoyun became a dividing soul tier elite or even immortal palace tier elite in the future, he still wouldn't be able to wash away the humiliation of today. My horizons have been broadened again today. I've finally witnessed the true meaning of shamelessness and having no bottom line, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. He then calmly strode forward. The Empress stood behind him and clasped her hands behind her back. She couldn't be bothered dealing with such trash. "Ling Han, there's no need to hurry. It's not your turn yet," Bei Xianming said with a sneer. Did Ling Han think that he would forgive him? How naive. "But I'm already getting impatient," Ling Han said as he continued to advance. He wasn't interested in watching Bei Xuanming's deplorable performance. Moreover, even though he had already cut off all ties with Fu Gaoyun, he had still received many benefits from him. After all, at the very least, the Empress Blood Dragon armor had been given to her by Fu Gaoyun. In addition, Fu Gaoyun was also a fairly decent person. "Halt!" a man shouted as he dashed over from behind Bei Xianming. He raised a fist and swung it toward Ling Han. Since an underling was present, their master naturally wouldn't need to step forward. Otherwise, what would such an underling be for? Boom! The fist swung over with an astonishing might, drawing on the power of the great Tao and forming numerous symbols in the air. This was a 3rd Severance elite who had already reached the peak stage. In reality, his battle prowess was even superior to that of Bei Xianming. He was only weaker than He Shaolin. This punch yearned to brutally crush Ling Han. Ling Han instantly replied with a strike of his own. No one saw how he achieved it, but with a casual move, he instantly grabbed the man's wrist and forcefully stopped him in his tracks. Bei Xuanming's jaw dropped in astonishment. Ling Han was only at the 1st Severance, so he hadn't imagined that he would be powerful enough to rival a 3rd Severance elite, regardless of how freakish he was. However, Ling Han's action instantly gave him a slap across the face. 3rd Severance. Ling Han is actually at the 3rd Severance. How is this possible? How many days have passed, yet he's already advanced from the 1st Severance to the 3rd Severance? He's already surpassed my cultivation level? How can such a thing have occurred? Does pummeling people feel good? Ling Han asked the man before him. His expression was eerily calm. The man was almost about to wet his pants in fright. He didn't know how to answer this question. "Pa!" Ling Han grabbed the man's hand and swung it toward his face. "Pa, pa, pa. Does it feel good? Does it feel good?" With each time he repeated this question, he would use the man's very own hand to slap him. The man's face became bruised and battered, yet Ling Han didn't look like stopping at all. It wasn't long before blood started to spray into the air. After that, it was broken flesh and shattered teeth that flew through the air. At this moment, even the man's bones had become visible. This was a bloody and brutal sight. However, Ling Han felt absolutely no sympathy. After all, this man had clearly yearned to crush him to death. If it weren't for his insane cultivation speed, and if he weren't an emperor tier, Whom could he have complained to if he were beaten to death? Stop! Bei Xianming roared. He had no option but to roar. His underling was being beaten to death, so who would still agree to serve him if he didn't express his displeasure at this moment? However, would Ling Han listen to him? Pa, pa, pa! Ling Han continued to force the man to slap himself. At the same time, he started to drag him toward Bei Xianming. There was a murderous aura in his eyes, and it was clear that Bei Xianming was his next target. Shaolin! Bei Xianming hurriedly exclaimed. He Shaolin nodded in reply. He then leaped over with a cold sneer and said, Third Severance King Tier? Ha! Before me, you're nothing but trash. King Tiers were only invincible among those at the same cultivation level. Right now, he Shaolin possessed an advantage of one minor level, and he had more so tempered himself at the peak stage of the fourth severance for countless hundreds of millions of years. As such, his battle prowess could completely rival that of King Tiers. That being the case, how could he not feel a sense of superiority? Ling Han dragged the collapsed man toward He Shaolin. He didn't speak, and in his eyes, it was as if He Shaolin were nothing more than a puff of air. He didn't need to pay any attention to him at all. How arrogant! He Shaolin said with a cold humph. He raised his right hand and struck at Ling Han's face. You like to slap people, yeah? Then have a taste of being slapped yourself. Pa! Ling Han raised a hand and grabbed He Shaolin's wrist. He Shaolin's expression instantly froze. How is this possible? Bei Xianming was also struck with shock and disbelief. In his eyes, He Shaolin was powerful enough to rival holy sons and holy daughters at the peak stage of the fourth severance. Yet his wrist had actually been caught by Ling Han. It was as if there existed a huge gulf between their battle prowess. You also want to feel good, hey? Ling Han said in a calm voice. He raised He Shaolin's hand and swung it toward his face. He Shaolin hurriedly unleashed his full power to resist. However, he was completely unable to rival Ling Han's overwhelming power. Pa! A stinging pain instantly traveled across his face. Tears of pain flowed from his eyes. These were tears of pain, yet they were also tears of humiliation. He was being slapped before so many people, so how could he endure this? Ling Han flicked his hands. Pa, pa! He Shaolin and the man were thrown before Bei Xianming's feet. Their arms and legs were spread, and they had already lost their consciousness. Bei Xianming involuntarily took a step back. There was shock and fear on his face. Just like how Fu Gaoyan couldn't find any reinforcements here, he couldn't either. Although he wasn't the only holy son of the lunar sect who had entered this mystery realm. The relationship between holy sons was that of competition and rivalry. Thus, how could he seek their help in his own personal matters? Firstly, he couldn't bear the humiliation of asking them for help. Secondly, asking them for help would only cause him to become a joke. As such, he now felt just as helpless as Fu Gaoyan had felt just then. Bei Xianming gritted his teeth and said, I admit defeat. The veins in his forehead were bulging. After saying this, he commanded his underlings to help He Shaolin and the man up. Perhaps he couldn't defeat Ling Han, but he could still choose to flee, couldn't he? Ling Han humphed and said, You want to leave just like that? What do you want? Bei Xianming asked in a solemn voice. He also knew that he had to pay a price for his actions. Ling Han grinned and said, Just then, didn't you say that I should behave humbly and obediently because I offended the Ziyun clan? Ha! Let me tell you something. I already killed Zai Bingyun a few days ago. Whoa. Bei Xianming felt a huge and deafening tremor in his mind, and he almost fainted in shock. Lies. This is definitely a lie. If Ling Han only offended Zai Bingyun, the Zai clan definitely wouldn't hunt him at all costs, even if they decided to target him. If he killed Zai Bingyun, however, the situation would become completely different. Who could humiliate a celestial king tier force? At that time, perhaps everyone here would have to die alongside Ling Han. Bei Xianming shivered in fear, and he couldn't help but think that Ling Han was a madman, or perhaps he was lying and playing a pointless prank. Why, you're definitely spewing **T. Ling Han smiled and said, "You think I have the time and effort to joke around with you? Didn't you call me arrogant and audacious? I'm simply showing you just how arrogant and audacious I am." Xiao! With a snap of his fingers, a burst of sword light pierced through Bei Xuanming's forehead and exited through the back of his skull. Pa! Bei Xuanming's legs weakened, and he instantly fell onto his knees. At the same time, life drained from his eyes. Meanwhile, Fu Gaoyun and the others went completely numb with fear. At this moment, Fu Gaoyun also recalled a question that Ling Han had asked him in the past. He had asked whether or not he was allowed to kill Bei Xianming. Back then, Fu Gaoyun had only treated this question as a joke. Thinking back now, it was clear that Ling Han had already developed killing intent toward Bei Xianming back then. He was far too audacious. Chapter 1835, Big Trouble. Chapter 1835, Big Trouble. Now that he had killed Bei Xianming, would the lunar sect be willing to let things slide? To say nothing of his friendly relationship with 2 3-star alchemists, the lunar sect would decide to kill him even if he were a grandson of one of the alchemists. One could indeed act with arrogance and haughtiness if they had the support of a 3-star alchemist. However, they couldn't act as they pleased. After all, alchemists only enjoyed such a lofty status because they were supported by cultivators. In other words, cultivators could choose to give them face, yet they could also choose not to give them face. In this world, power was the ultimate deciding factor. Ling Han! Fu Gaoyun and the others exclaimed in a shaky voice. Their faces were green with dread. Ling Han glanced at them and asked him, "What's the matter?" Upon seeing their extremely anxious expressions, he finally came to a sudden realization. "Oh, don't worry, everything's fine. This isn't the first holy son of the lunar sect that I've killed. There was also another one. What was his name again?" Ling Han frowned and thought, if Nangong Ting could still see after his death, he definitely wouldn't be able to close his eyes in peace. He was the holy son of a 3-star force, yet Ling Han had even forgotten his name. Pooh! Fu Gaoyun and the others choked and spluttered upon hearing this. Not only were they not reassured, but they even started to feel more tense and anxious. You killed another holy son of the lunar sect. Gasp! Currently, the lunar sect only had 2 holy sons who were at the severing mundane tier. One was Bei Xianming, and the other was Nangong Ting. Brotherling, was that person called Nangong Ting? Fu Gaoyun asked with a sliver of hope that the answer would be negative. Ling Han clapped his hands with a smile and said, "Yes, it was him." Fuck! Fu Gaoyun and the others cursed in their minds. They then stared at Ling Han with a dazed expression. They didn't know how to describe this person. Could he be any more ferocious? "Oh, by the way, I genuinely killed Zai Bingyun. I wasn't joking," Ling Han said with a smile. His actions had been witnessed by Lin Fong and the others, so it was already impossible for him to keep it a secret anyway. Thus, he chose to confidently admit it. He had indeed killed Zai Bingyun. Moreover, he had done so with a clear conscience. If they had only been shocked just then, Fu Gaoyun and the others were completely terrified now. Who was Zai Bingyun? She was the successor of the Zai clan, a prodigy among prodigies, and a king tier among king tiers. She was a supreme elite who had severed heaven and earth. Only celestial king tier forces could raise such an emperor tier prodigy. Moreover, only very few of these prodigies existed. Yet, she had actually been killed by Ling Han? See, could he cause any more trouble? Ling Han grinned and continued, "Oh, that's right. I also killed Luo Changfeng as well." Fu Gaoyun and the others instantly collapsed to the ground. Holy fuck! Ling Han chuckled and said, I've caused quite a lot of trouble, so there's no need for you guys to follow me too closely. Otherwise, some people might consider you as my accomplice. All right, till fate brings us together again. Fu Gaoyun gazed at Ling Han for a long time before saying, Brother Ling, I genuinely can't tell how far you'll walk in the future. He felt like his goal of becoming the clan leader of a 3-star force was already a lofty one. After all, this was a 3-star force. However, compared to Ling Han, he had already killed the successors of 2 Celestial King tier forces, and it was inevitable that he would be relentlessly hunted by the Zai clan and the Thundercloud Palace. Just Ling Han's troublemaking ability alone was already enough to render him speechless and stunned. Gaoyun, let's go, Qingzhong said in an urgent voice. Although he was stunned by Ling Han's actions, he didn't want anything to do with him at all. After all, the Celestial King tier forces wouldn't care about how many people they targeted when they unleashed their vengeance. He didn't want to be caught up in their revenge. Fu Gaoyun sighed with emotion before nodding at Ling Han and leaving the canyon. The others also left with him. When passing Ling Han, Fu Xiaoyun couldn't help but steal a few glances at him. Her heart fluttered slightly. Just as Bei Xianming had said, if Ling Han had remained at the Fu clan, it would have been completely possible that they might have become a couple. However, it was a shame that this was completely impossible now. Even if she were willing, the Fu clan definitely wouldn't be willing. If they became involved in a Celestial King tier force's act of revenge, their only fate would be death and destruction. Abandon your unrealistic thoughts, the Empress said coldly. Such an indecisive woman wanted to become her sister? She wasn't worthy. Fu Xiaoyan was feeling extremely unwilling as she glanced at the Empress, yet she was immediately rendered speechless by her stunning beauty. The others also noticed the Empress at this moment, and they were also mesmerized by her breathtaking beauty. The Empress waved her hand and said, Piss off! Pung, pung, pung. They were instantly sent flying by the Empress. They didn't even dare to support Ling Han, so how could they be worthy of becoming his friends? Only Situ Xiaojin was spared from this. Her reaction was much more composed, and even though she also stole a few extra glances at the Empress, she quickly came to her senses. She looked toward Ling Han and asked, Is your A*S truly okay? Fuck, what's up with your thought process? You're still hung up on this? It's as good as can be. There's no need for you to worry. Ling Han was completely helpless against this filth queen. Oh, Situ Xiaojin nodded in reply. However, there was disappointment on her face, and it was clear that she had hoped to hear a bloody and brutal story. After Fu Gaoyun and the others left, Ling Han swept his cold gaze across He Shaolin and his companions. However, he decided not to kill them. Instead, he simply crippled their cultivation. This would cause them to lose all of their cultivation in a few years, at which time they would become ordinary people. With this done, he held hands with the Empress and walked into the canyon. In no time, news of him killing Bei Xianming had already spread far and wide. In fact, there were even rumors of him killing Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng. However, because they hadn't witnessed it, most people naturally chose not to believe this. In any case, was it that easy to kill the successors of Celestial King tier forces? The veracity of the former piece of news was confirmed, yet the veracity of the latter pieces wasn't. However, these rumors spread through the mystery realm at an incredible rate. Even so, no one dared to provoke Ling Han and the Empress anymore. To say nothing else, just his act of killing Bei Xianming was already reason enough for others not to provoke him. Although Bei Xianming wasn't powerful, there had been a powerful cultivator beside him. Yet, he had still been killed by Ling Han. As such, Ling Han was not only courageous, but he was also astonishingly powerful. Who would dare to provoke such a person? Moreover, what if Ling Han had genuinely killed Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng? If that were true, would he be afraid to kill a few more people? Wherever Ling Han passed, people would avoid him as if he were the plague. Even the Empress' stunning beauty couldn't tempt them into taking risks. Given a choice between a stunning beauty and their life, most people would choose to keep the latter. After all, they hadn't cultivated for hundreds of millions of years for the sake of women. However, there were always those who believed that they were an exception. They believed that as long as they had an advantage in numbers, and as long as they launched a sneak attack, they would have a chance to defeat and kill Ling Han. At that time, they would be able to use his corpse to seek rewards from the lunar sect. If Ling Han had genuinely killed Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng, they would naturally have been able to obtain even richer rewards and greater fame. Moreover, they would also be able to obtain the breathtakingly beautiful Empress as loot. This was naturally an enticing thought. There was strength in numbers, and enough ants could bite an elephant to death. Moreover, they were all powerful cultivators who were far more powerful than ants. At the very least, they could be regarded as wolves. A pack of wolves could kill a tiger. What did it matter that the tiger was the king of beasts? These cultivators contacted each other and encouraged more people to join their ranks. Surprisingly, a portion of people were indeed persuaded by their proposal. There was a surge of undercurrents, and a great number of invisible sword projections were already entangled and clashing. Chapter 1836. Ling Han again? Chapter 1836. Ling Han again. Ling Han stayed in the canyon for a day, taking a short rest. He had obtained a great amount of loot, and he had spent the entire day looking over it. For example, there was godly metal for his divine demon sword. Apart from obtaining a huge pile of pseudo-divine metal from Qian Zhaoyang, he had also obtained a huge amount from Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng. As the successors of powerful sects, they were all astoundingly wealthy. After feeding all of this pseudo-divine metal to his divine demon sword, this future celestial tool advanced to become a 2-star pseudo-celestial tool. It was almost 30% of the way to becoming a genuine celestial tool. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. The divine demon sword had surpassed his cultivation level again, and it was now able to rival elites at the Yin Soul and the Yang Soul. However, it was a shame that it could only rival them in terms of toughness. This was because his cultivation level was still too low, which meant that he was unable to imbue the divine demon sword with higher level regulations. As such, its might was partially restricted. However, this didn't matter. Everything would be resolved once he advanced to a suitable cultivation level. Ling Han also refined the tree heart of the white demon tree, obtaining a wisp of murderous aura in the process. This murderous aura was built upon the regulation of slaughter, and in terms of destructive ability alone, it was even more impressive than most weapons. In reality, everyone possessed a murderous aura. However, this aura was often uncontrollable. After cultivating the regulation of slaughter, however, one would be able to actively control this murderous aura. In fact, they would even be able to control the murderous aura of others. The stronger one's murderous aura, the more powerful their battle prowess would become. This was a typical case of nurturing oneself through battle and becoming more and more ferocious through combat. The next day, Ling Han decided to set off for the final region of the volcano with the Empress. He wanted to explore the depths of this mystery realm. When they exited the canyon, however, they realized that it had suddenly become lively and boisterous. As it turned out, bewitching Maiden Ro had arrived. This seductive beauty from the Purity sect was extremely alluring and charming, with each of her actions overflowing with beauty and elegance. Countless men were enchanted by her beauty, and those who had weaker resolve were already drooling with lust. Bewitching Maiden Ro also noticed Ling Han and the Empress, and she couldn't help but grimace upon seeing them. She had naturally consumed the reincarnation tea. Moreover, because she had been angry, she had used all of the tea leaves at once. Afterward, She had fallen into inconsolable regret. That was definitely celestial tea. Although it wouldn't help one comprehend regulations, it would definitely help one comprehend the great Tao. A single dream would last for eons, and this was naturally as impressive as could be. You bastard! You gave me such a valuable treasure, yet you didn't tell me about its unique properties? You caused me to waste almost all of it. I truly want to bite you to death, you bastard! Bewitching maiden Ro truly wanted to leap over and bite Ling Han. However, she forcefully suppressed her urge upon remembering that he was currently surrounded by trouble. If she leaped over, it was extremely likely that she would also become caught up in his mess. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle upon seeing this. He then held hands with the Empress and walked away. However, after taking just a few steps, the earth beneath them suddenly erupted. 3 people shot out, and the weapons in their hands gleamed with a cold and murderous aura as they slashed and stabbed at Ling Han. At the same time, the boulders in the surroundings also disappeared in unison. At least 10 people leaped out and charged at Ling Han. People were charging over from everywhere, and they left Ling Han no path of escape. Ling Han was slightly astonished. He wasn't astonished about being attacked, but he was instead astonished about his enemy's concealment techniques. He hadn't detected them at all. This kind of concealment technique was fairly impressive. While he was praising their concealment technique, the attacks of his enemies had already arrived. Bewitching Maiden Ro was astonished, and she felt an urge to step forward and help Ling Han. However, upon recalling his freakish power, she immediately abandoned this thought. She had personally witnessed Zai Bingyan and Luo Changfeng combusting their divine fetus at that time. Even so, they still hadn't been able to defeat Ling Han. Could these dozen or so people rival the battle prowess of Zai Bingyan and Luo Changfeng? Peng! Their attacks landed, and the divine light of regulations burst through the air, triggering a gigantic explosion that caused the entire earth to tremor. In the distance, everyone was astonished by this sudden sneak attack, and they all turned around to spectate the battle. Ling Han was being attacked by so many people, and several of them were even king tiers. He was definitely going to be killed. Who told him to be so flagrant and eye-catching? When the divine light of regulations vanished, they saw that Ling Han and the Empress were still standing there as if nothing had even happened. They were completely unscathed, and there wasn't even a single sign of battle on their bodies. This, shocked, one of the assailants couldn't help but exclaim, "Impossible!" Even if Ling Han was capable of blocking all of their attacks, he shouldn't have been able to do so with such ease. Ling Han had naturally activated the banishing technique on himself and the Empress. With his current strength, his separate dimension naturally couldn't be shattered by such trash. Ling Han glanced at that person and said, "How can you trash understand my true power?" Pung! With a single punch, he smashed that person into a cloud of broken flesh and blood. Upon seeing this, all of his remaining assailants became pale with fright. They hurriedly turned around to flee. There were a dozen or so of them, yet there was only a single Ling Han. As such, he would only be able to catch up to 1 or 2 of them at most. However, they were far too naive. Whoosh! With a humph, the Empress summoned 10 battle beasts, each of which roared as they lunged toward an assailant. These battle beasts were terrifying, and they viciously incinerated one of the assailants, turning him into ashes in no time. The spectators almost wet their pants in fright. This couple was far too powerful, no. Ling Han also launched a casual attack, with an arc of lightning easily disposing of all of the remaining assailants. He then clapped his hands with a calm expression before holding the Empress' hand and walking away. It was as if nothing had happened just then. The spectators exchanged astonished glances with each other. They were speechless with shock. After a brief moment, they finally broke into spirited discussions, sighing with emotion as they discussed Ling Han's and the Empress's overwhelming power. Of course, some of them were also admiring the Empress' breathtaking beauty. Humph! So what if he's freakish? He's killed Bei Xianming, so he'll definitely be killed by the lunar sect when he leaves the mystery realm, someone said with jealousy and hate. So be it if Ling Han were powerful, yet he even had such a stunningly beautiful wife. Was there still justice in the world? He had obtained all of the benefits in the entire world. Indeed, does he truly think that he can pat his behind and leave after killing the holy son of a 3-star force? There was more than one person who was filled with jealousy and hate. When we leave, don't forget to inform the lunar sect of these matters, someone said. As a spectator, they weren't afraid of things exploding out of control. Many people chuckled upon hearing this. Ling Han was supremely powerful, so much so that they could barely breathe in his presence. Thus, they naturally viewed him as a thorn in their side. Although Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng were also insanely powerful, they were the successors of celestial king tier forces. In other words, they were beings that they could only look up to. They didn't dare to feel jealousy or hatred toward them. However, who was Ling Han? He was a measly subordinate of a 3-star force. As such, how could his status surpass that of holy sons and holy daughters? Pei! Xiao, xiao, xiao! At this moment, 3 figures suddenly descended from the sky. They were none other than Lin Fang, Tung San, and Wei Nian. Celestial Maiden Lin, Brother Tung, Brother Wei. Everyone hurriedly greeted them with respect. These 3 individuals were all holy sons and holy daughters, and they were more so extremely talented cultivators. Otherwise, they couldn't have passed the examination in the Ascending Dragon Palace, while the others all failed. "Why have you 3 only arrived now?" a holy son asked. Lin Fang pondered for a moment before saying, "It was because of Ling Han, of course." Ling Han again. Everyone faltered upon hearing this. Chapter 1837. Background of the Large Black Dog. Chapter 1837. Background of the Large Black Dog. What did Ling Han do? They all asked in curiosity. Lin Fang glanced at bewitching Maiden Ro before replying. Ling Han didn't only kill Bei Xianming. He also killed Bei Yuxiong. Qian Zhao Tian, she reeled off a long list of names, each of which corresponded to the holy son, holy daughter, or successor of a 3-star sect or 3-star clan. This. Everyone was transfixed with shock and disbelief upon hearing this. At the same time, cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. That Ling Han was an absolute demon. How many king tiers had he already killed? Fortunately, he hadn't gone on a rampage just then. However, everyone was also feeling extremely puzzled. How would Ling Han escape after exiting the mystery realm? With so many 3-star forces targeting him, could Ling Han escape death? Why did he insist on acting so wantonly? Lin Fang didn't reveal the news of Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng being killed by Ling Han. This was because she, along with Tung San and Wei Nian, wanted to personally report this news. Although they would have to face the wrath of the celestial king tier forces, they would also be able to make some connections with them. Everyone shook their head upon hearing this. It was inevitable that Ling Han would be killed. Perhaps the Fu clan could rival the lunar sect. But what about all of the other 3-star forces? As such, Ling Han wouldn't be able to escape death. Ling Han and the Empress exited the canyon and entered a land that no one could enter. Ling Han was still feeling fine, yet the Empress had to channel the flame control technique. Otherwise, she would be instantly incinerated by the fire particles in this region. After arriving here, Ling Han's 9 heavens flame started to pulsate in excitement, and it was as if it wanted to leap out from his dantian. Ling Han humphed upon detecting this. Regardless of what relationship this 9 heavens flame had with the celestial king of this place before, it was now a source power that belonged to him. As such, it could only listen to his commands. Otherwise, he would rather abandon it than keep it in his body. After all, what use was a disobedient power? Moreover, this was a power that resided in his body. If it went wild, that would lead to unimaginable consequences. The nine heavens flame instantly calmed down and became obedient. Like a scolded child, it even expressed a feeling of grievance. However, Ling Han was completely unfazed. When it came to matters that affected his power, he definitely had to make sure that there were no risks and mistakes. Several hours passed, and they had already reached the foot of the volcano. Along the way, they had also obtained a huge number of blood dragon stones. This was because no one else could venture into this area. As such, their yield was naturally very impressive. This was an accumulation of hundreds of millions of years, and it could be said that they would obtain a blood dragon stone each time they bent down. They didn't need to explicitly look for them at all. Their yield was bountiful, and Bewitching Maiden Row was also having a great time picking up blood dragon stones in the outer regions behind them. She couldn't reach the same depth as Ling Han and the Empress, yet she could still venture further than all of the other people. As such, her yield was naturally very impressive as well. Bewitching Maiden Row's eyes were filled with curiosity as she watched Ling Han and the Empress disappear from her sight. What would they find in that volcano? When the Mystery Realm returned to a state of wild chaos, how would they flee from the clutches of the three-star forces? Once news of his actions spread, almost half of the forces would target Ling Han and yearn for his death. Among these forces, there were even 2 Celestial King tier forces. Although you two are freakish, with one of you being at the 3rd severance and the other at the 2nd severance, I can't think of any way for you to flee from the grasp of these forces. Ling Han and the Empress started to climb the volcano. There was no path here, yet this naturally couldn't hold them back. They climbed the volcano with their hands and feet. Flying wasn't an option, as the volcano was surrounded by a chaotic aura that could easily kill anyone who came into contact with it. The erupting volcano could only suppress this chaotic aura. However, there would still be remnants of this deadly aura swirling around the volcano. "Little Han! Hi, Little Han!" Someone behind them shouted in an enthusiastic voice. They turned around, only to see the large black dog quickly bounding over. He was only using his hind legs, yet his speed was still astonishingly quick. It wasn't long before he caught up to Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han was astonished, and he asked, "Why have you come over here?" "Grandpa Dog is about to embark on a long journey, so I especially came over here to say goodbye." The large black dog rested a paw on Ling Han's shoulder and said, "See, Grandpa Dog is a loyal individual, isn't he?" Ling Han chuckled in reply. How much trouble had this detestable dog already caused for him? "Hang on a second. You've never practiced the flame control technique before, so how are you resisting the fire particles here?" Even blood dragon armor didn't possess such a powerful protective ability. Moreover, even immortal palace tier elites didn't dare to venture into this area, so how had this detestable dog managed to enter? The large black dog scratched his head before suddenly gazing up at the sky and saying, "The weather is fairly nice today. The moon is hanging high, and the sun is shining with such radiance. Fuck the hell off." Ling Han couldn't help but ask, "Little Black, who in the world are you?" The freakish nature of the large black dog had already exceeded the abilities of severing mundane tier cultivators. Not long ago, he had even bitten a 4th severance Grand Elder while he was only at the Genesis tier. This was also an incredible feat. At the very least, Ling Han had never heard of such a freakish individual before. The large black dog's eyes darted about, and after a long while he finally said, "Since it's come to this, Grandpa Dog won't keep you in the dark anymore. Truth be told, I'm actually your long-lost father." "Fuck off," Ling Han said as he kicked the large black dog. He actually dared to take advantage of him. The large black dog pondered for a moment before finally saying, All right, since I'm about to leave, I'll tell you the truth, so you aren't always trying to rely on me. He paused for a moment before continuing in a haughty voice. I'm actually a celestial king. Pooh! Ling Han instantly spluttered with laughter. This detestable dog was a celestial king? Which celestial king would look like this? He couldn't help but roar with laughter. However, his laughter became quieter and quieter, and in the end he silently stared at the large black dog. This was because the large black dog was wearing an extremely solemn expression. It didn't look like he was joking. If this were any other place, Ling Han would be convinced that the large black dog was joking, even if he wore such a solemn expression. However, this was indeed a place that even immortal palace tier elites couldn't reach. In other words, the large black dog was at least as powerful as an ascending origin tier elite. Gasp! This detestable dog wasn't joking when he said he wanted to steal the panties of Celestial King Ling Miao. This detestable dog. Are you truly a Celestial King? Ling Han asked with a serious expression. The large black dog snickered before saying, Just how impressive was I when I used to stride through the world? Countless female celestial kings yearned to become my mounts. Yet I only chose the most beautiful few. They were only slightly inferior to your wife. He glanced at the Empress as he said this. Ling Han's expression was solemn, and he asked, Why are you helping me? The large black dog pointed at Ling Han's dantian with a smile, and he asked, He didn't tell you? Small tower. Ling Han's heart shuddered. Sure enough, the large black dog and Small Tower were acquainted. They were definitely good friends. He shook his head and replied no. The large black dog scratched his head and said, Back then I was a supreme celestial king. If I wasn't at the 9th heaven, then I was at the 8th heaven. However, for some reason, I suffered severe wounds and entered a state of slumber in order to recover. When I opened my eyes again, eons had already passed. At the same time, my cultivation also fell to rock bottom. I was unable to recall the events of the past, and only when I entered the celestial realm did I finally regain some of my past memories. My cultivation has also returned to somewhere above the ascending origin tier and below the celestial king tier. After all, it's far too difficult to advance to the celestial king tier. Ling Han felt as if he were in a dream as he listened to the large black dog's explanation. Not only was this detestable dog a celestial king, but he had even reached the pinnacle of the celestial king tier? He had been at the 8th or 9th heaven. But I still don't understand. Why are you helping me? Ling Han asked again. Chapter 1838. Heavenly Fire, Celestial King. Chapter 1838. Heavenly Fire, Celestial King. The large black dog shook his head and said, You're far too weak right now, so it's not beneficial for you to know too much. Initially, I wanted to help you reach the Celestial King tier. However, following the increase in my power, I suspect that several old monsters have already detected my presence. As such, I'll only be putting you in danger if I stay beside you. Ling Han was rendered speechless. To be referred to as old monsters by someone who had reached the 8th heaven or 9th heaven. Just what kind of beings were these? They were definitely 9th heaven celestial kings. He carefully recalled the past events. Even though the large black dog had always been causing trouble for him, this could also be viewed as an act of examining and tempering him. Moreover, even if the large black dog hadn't provoked others, would the conflict between Ling Han and them not have occurred? For example, his conflict with Zai Bingyin. For the sake of the heavenly Dao Jade, it was inevitable that there would have been a battle between them. Moreover, with Zai Bingyun's resolute nature, it was inevitable that they would have still battled to the death. The large black dog had simply caused this battle to erupt earlier. Anyhow, even if an elite had interfered, the large black dog would have been more than powerful enough to deal with them. Everything was in order to train and toughen Ling Han. Of course, the large black dog definitely wasn't an individual of great morals. He would often lie, cheat, and screw others over. And he had even set his eyes on the panties of a fellow celestial king. Only the large black dog would commit such atrocities, and only the large black dog would ponder such atrocities. Not long ago, the large black dog had also given him some suggestions regarding his cultivation. Most importantly, he had told him about the fifth severance. This was an obstacle that Ling Han had to overcome if he wanted to become a supreme celestial king. If Ling Han had unknowingly skipped this test, there would have been no chance for him to regret his decision. Then what's up with this volcano? Ling Han asked. A rare expression of loneliness spread across the large black dog's face as he glanced at the volcano, and he replied, "This is the burial place of an old friend. He failed while trying to advance to the ninth heaven, and his body is buried in this mystery realm." This was his own decision, and he desired for his willpower to be refined by time, such that the purest of his essence would remain for future generations to use and undergo transformations. Ling Han shuddered upon hearing this. Although the ninth heaven is the pinnacle of the celestial king tier, eighth heaven celestial kings don't necessarily need to sacrifice their lives in an attempt to reach such a level, right? After reaching the eighth heaven, how many more opponents would one still have? Moreover, they would enjoy an infinite lifespan, so did they really need to roar in urgency and attempt to advance to the ninth heaven? If they waited for several epochs, perhaps they could have gathered enough source power and celestial medicines, thereby increasing their chance of success. Why did they need to risk their life? Brat, you don't understand. The large black dog patted Ling Han's shoulder and said, "On the surface, it appears as if this is a calm and peaceful world. In reality, however, there's a terrifying killing intent hidden beneath this facade of calm. Grow as fast as you can. Otherwise, when this storm of darkness arrives, everything will be destroyed." Ling Han knew that the large black dog wouldn't tell him any more details, even if he asked. This was just like with Small Tower. When it came to these critical matters, they would always refuse to answer. Moreover, their excuse was still far too weak. He slowly nodded in understanding. Although he was curious about this storm of darkness, or whatever, he understood that his main focus right now was raising his power. How is this celestial king related to the nine heavens flame? Ling Han asked. The large black dog chuckled before saying, "Source powers of heaven and earth can evolve. For example, the heavenly Tao Jade that you obtained was birthed by the life force of heaven and earth. Yet, it's no longer a source power of heaven and earth. Similarly, the nine heavens flame can also develop intelligence and awareness. At that time, it will no longer be a source power of heaven and earth. Instead, it will become a living being." Ling Han was astonished, and he asked, "So you're saying that this celestial king was formed from this nine heavens flame?" No wonder the nine heavens flame had been so excited just then. "Correct," the large black dog said with a nod. This celestial king was called the Heavenly Fire Celestial King, and he was skilled in manipulating fire. After his passing, a wisp of remnant flame remained burning for hundreds of millions of years, giving birth to a new nine heavens flame. Meanwhile, after being burned for countless hundreds of millions of years, his murderous aura has already been refined away, with only his essence remaining. I then used this essence power to temper you, not to raise your cultivation level, but instead to strengthen your cultivation foundation. This is to help you reach the pinnacle in the future. Can't others use this power? Ling Han asked. Of course not, the large black dog said proudly. This is a source power of heaven and earth, and unless it was me, it would rather return its essence to heaven and earth. Ling Han became even more curious upon hearing this. From the large black dog's reply, it was clear that the Heavenly Fire Celestial King could have still survived even though he had failed to advance to the ninth heaven. However, he had chosen to abandon his life and leave his essence for those in the future instead. Ling Han couldn't help but feel immense admiration. "Come over here, brat. After preparing for hundreds of millions of years, all we yearn to see is a spark that illuminates the entire universe," the large black dog said in a solemn voice. "After being tempered by this essence of a celestial king, you'll also have a greater chance of advancing to the fifth severance. After refining himself for hundreds of millions of years, the essence left behind by the heavenly fire celestial king can only improve my chance of advancing to the fifth severance by a little bit. The fifth severance is far too difficult to reach, no? The fifth severance is naturally extremely difficult to reach. Moreover, your foundation is still far too weak, and you haven't been strengthened with the resources of a celestial king tier force, either. Although you've risen from a small world, and although you've reached a state of perfection in each major tier, your potential is far too important." The large black dog couldn't help but sigh with emotion. "Right now, it's time for you to defy the heavens and rewrite your fate." Ling Han was slightly doubtful about this. He wasn't weaker than any prodigy. After all, weren't Zai Bingyin and Luo Changfeng also the successors of Celestial King tier forces? Yet, they had still been killed by him. Moreover, his cultivation level was even inferior to theirs. The large black dog noticed his doubts, and he couldn't help but scoff and say, "You think I'm comparing you to those pieces of trash? Those I care about are the successors of celestial kings who have at least reached the seventh heaven. If you come across those prodigies, you'll understand just how terrifying they are. In this kind of small place, it's simply impossible for celestial king tier forces to raise successors who are capable of becoming celestial kings. However, in genuinely powerful sects, those who are bestowed with the title of Holy Son and Holy Daughter can definitely become celestial kings. The only difference is which heaven they can reach." Upon hearing the large black dog's words, Ling Han's haughty pride finally subsided. A solemn expression spread across his face. "There are many celestial king tier forces like this?" Ling Han asked. The Western celestial realm has always been more powerful than the Eastern celestial realm. However, even the Eastern celestial realm has several ninth heaven celestial king tier forces. It's just that you're located extremely far away from them. It's because of this that you haven't come across any true prodigy, the large black dog said. "I'm not trying to deflate you, but you can only rank in the lower quartile among the genuine successors of powerful celestial king tier forces." Ling Han was slightly unwilling to accept this again, and he said, "Don't forget, I possess two source powers of heaven and earth. I've already taken them into account. It's because of them that you can rank in the lower quartile. Otherwise, The large black dog shook his head. Ling Han was indeed deflated by this. In the next instant, however, his fighting spirit immediately started to rage. He gazed at the peak of the volcano, and he asked, "Then what about after I defy the heavens and rewrite my fate?" "You'll rank in the middle, or perhaps in the upper quartile," the large black dog replied with uncertainty. "This is only enough to reach the upper quartile." An expression of doubt spread across Ling Han's face. Was this detestable dog purposefully trying to deflate him? Even if he wanted to trigger his fighting spirit, there was no need to take things so far, right? If I told you that some have abandoned their body thousands of times in order to reach a state of perfection in the severing mundane tier, would you be so shocked that you can't even fart anymore? The large black dog said with a chuckle. Chapter 1839. Where do you rank among the sea of prodigies? Chapter 1839. Where do you rank among the sea of prodigies? Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. After a while he finally said, abandoning their body thousands of times simply to reach a state of perfection in the severing mundane tier. The large black dog nodded in confirmation. Although the ultimate purpose of cultivation is to comprehend and grasp the great Tao, 10,000 people crossing the same sea might yield 10,000 different methods. Cultivation is no different. You might be severing the same heaven and earth, yet the difference between you and someone else can still be unimaginably great. I'm aware of a freakish prodigy who severed a branch of the great Tao each time he severed the mundane. After reaching the fifth severance, he would abandon his physical body and resurrect to sever more branches of the great Tao. After reaching a point where he couldn't sever any more branches of the great Tao, he finally decided to advance to the dividing soul tier. Ling Han was stunned upon hearing this. Just what kind of freak was this? Isn't it often said that one's original body is the best? Even if it's not a divine fetus, isn't it best for one to keep their original body? Ling Han asked. That's indeed the case, the large black dog said with a nod. However, if you become a celestial king in the future, you'll be able to perfectly fuse with your body even if it isn't your original body. Anyhow, if you're not confident in becoming a celestial king, then what's the purpose of going to so much trouble? This makes sense. Ling Han was delighted upon learning this, and he said, after reaching the fifth severance, I'll also abandon this body to cultivate for several more lifetimes. Impossible, the large black dog immediately refuted. Firstly, your body has been tempered by the indestructible heaven scroll, so it can't be abandoned anyway. Even if your physical body is destroyed and you possess someone else, your Tao will have been severed. At that time, you won't be able to advance any further. You practice a different cultivation technique, and this has determined that you can't follow the same path. Secondly, there's not enough time for you. It's integral that you reach a state of perfection with each mundane that you sever. Even if your severances aren't as comprehensive as that freak's, you can slowly make up for this in the future. In any case, the difference won't be too great. The indestructible heaven scroll is the most powerful physique tempering cultivation technique in the entire world. By practicing it, you won't be weaker than anyone else. Ling Han's heart shuddered. The large black dog even knew about the indestructible heaven scroll? Just what kind of relationship did he have with the owner of the Tower of Three Realms? Who is that freakish prodigy? Where is he now? The large black dog glanced at Ling Han before calmly saying, You've heard of him before. I've even heard of him before. Who is he? The Imperial Void Celestial King, the large black dog said. He paused for a moment before continuing. I'm fairly sure he was already at the eighth heaven back then. Moreover, he was only a single step from reaching the ninth heaven. Right now, it's extremely likely that he's already advanced to the ninth heaven. Gasp! A ninth heaven celestial king. Ling Han recalled what Qing Fu had told him. Back then, the celestial king of the Chung clan had also been an incredibly freakish being. In the end, however, he had vanished after being defeated by a group of celestial kings. After that, the Imperial Void Celestial King had stepped forward and erased the entire Qing clan. If the Imperial Void Celestial King had truly become a ninth heaven Celestial King, how would Ling Han exact revenge for the Chung clan? Is the Imperial Void Celestial King from the Sealed Emotion Palace? Ling Han was just about to ask a question, yet his mouth was quickly covered by the large black dog's paw. He was stopped from continuing his question. Brat, if you don't want to die, don't casually throw these titles around. Once you mention them, you'll trigger the detection of those old monsters. Regardless of where in the celestial realm you are, their divine sense will still possess the ability to instantly appear before you, the large black dog exclaimed. His spittle sprayed all over Ling Han's face. In fact, Small Tower had also warned him about this before. The titles of some supreme beings couldn't be casually mentioned. Hang on. The Imperial Void Celestial King is already a ninth heaven Celestial King. Yet the large black dog didn't become so worked up when I mentioned his name. Why did he become so worked up when I mentioned the Sealed Emotion Palace? I can only assume that there's an even more powerful individual in the Sealed Emotion Palace. A paramount ruler among the ninth heaven Celestial Kings. Ling Han didn't ask any more questions. Judging by the large black dog's expression, it was as if he wanted to completely seal his mouth. As such, how could he continue to ask about this topic? Small Tower had also mentioned this to him before. If he wanted to know about these matters, he would at least have to become a celestial king. There were 9 heavens in the celestial king tier, and advancing to each subsequent level was as difficult as ascending the heavens. The 3 of them ascended the volcano, and the large black dog continued to tell them about the heavenly fire celestial king. In the past, this place had indeed been a powerful sect. However, it was a shame that the heavenly fire celestial king had passed away. The powerful sect disbanded after that, and all of its disciples left. This place then transformed into a burial ground for the heavenly fire celestial king. This was because the heavenly fire celestial king still had a mission. He wanted to refine himself and return to a state of origin so that he could help someone in the future. However, time was an eternal enemy, and the large black dog and the other friends of the heavenly fire celestial king either died or became severely wounded. As time passed, no more powerful elites stood guard at this burial ground. It was also because of this that the Thundercloud celestial king, Purple River celestial king, and other celestial kings entered here and engaged in an earth-shattering battle to fight for divine metal. However, none of them discovered the secret of the heavenly fire celestial king. More precisely, even after their death, the arrangements of 8th heaven celestial kings weren't something that measly 1st heaven celestial kings could discover and understand. After learning this, Ling Han finally understood the history and origin of this mystery realm. Anyhow, it wasn't long before they reached the peak of the volcano. The large black dog told the Empress to stand in the distance, after which he started to chant at the crater of the volcano. Wang. A veined pattern lit up on the ground, stretching all the way from the crater to the foot of the volcano. A second vein pattern then lit up, followed by a third, a fourth, and all the way until the 108th. Boom! A brilliant radiance soared into the sky, and it was as if the entire volcano was about to fracture and collapse. The volcano shuddered violently. Pung, pung, pung. Countless blood dragon stones were spat out from the volcano at an even quicker rate. This was a truly magnificent sight. Far away in the canyon, everyone was stunned upon seeing this. Such an astonishing phenomenon had never occurred before. Is this because of Ling Han? If it was because of him, that would be far too unfathomable. After all, even Immortal Palace tier elites couldn't enter that region. As a measly 3rd Severance cultivator, how could he trigger such an incredible commotion? However, if it wasn't because of him, this kind of phenomenon had never occurred before, so why would it only occur after Ling Han entered that region? Closer to the volcano, bewitching Maiden Row couldn't help but retreat in disarray. The fire particles among heaven and earth had suddenly become wild and chaotic, so much so that she couldn't withstand them even with her flame control technique. She had no option but to retreat. Fortunately, she had obtained an astonishing number of blood dragon stones. As such, it wouldn't matter even if she were forced to leave the mystery realm now. Boom, boom, boom. The volcano descended into chaos, throwing columns of scorching lava into the air. However, in an eerie sight, these columns of lava didn't fall from the sky. Meanwhile, the 108 veined patterns glowed with an increasing brilliance as they seeped further and further into the ground. The earth trembled, and the volcano surprisingly grew taller and taller. In an unfathomable turn of events, the volcano then started to hover in the air. Ling Han and the Empress yelped in astonishment. This was because the volcano was only a small corner of a rising figure. A colossal figure crawled up from the ground. This was a humanoid figure, and there was a single horn protruding from their forehead. Right now, boiling lava was still flowing from this horn. This was a colossal human who appeared as if they could connect heaven and earth. In fact, just their horn alone could already pierce through the clouds. As such, how tall would they be if they fully stood up? The giant stood up, and he radiated with a domineering might as he peered down at the earth. His aura was surging, and those before him had no option but to prostrate themselves. Eighth heaven, celestial king. Old friend, we finally meet again, the large black dog said with emotion. It sure was relaxing for you to leave first. You've left all of the troublesome matters to Grandpa Dog. However, who told Grandpa Dog to still be alive? I have to do what I have to do. Rest assured, I'll definitely burn and offer Celestial King Ling Miao's panties to you. Back then we couldn't peep on Celestial Maiden Ling Miao bathing, so I can only offer her panties to you now. That will allow you to finally rest in peace. The large black dog continued to murmur, and it was all about his debauched adventures with the heavenly fire Celestial King. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace as he listened on. He started to suspect that it was because of their incredible debauchery that they had been punished by the heavens. "Brat, come here!" the large black dog suddenly shouted. Chapter 1840, Refining a Celestial King's Heart. Chapter 1840, Refining a Celestial King's Heart. Ling Han took a step forward and started to channel his origin power. At the same time, he also displayed his regulations, especially the 9 heavens flame that was burning with vigor. The large black dog started to form hand seals again, controlling the colossal giant in the sky. The colossal giant's chest started to glow. Pooh! A blazing, fist-sized rock then flew over from his chest. This was the colossal giant's heart. It had been incredibly large before, yet after being refined by himself, it had now shrunk to the size of an ordinary fist. Shoo! The blazing heart was as quick as lightning as it flew toward the large black dog. If it had been any other immortal palace tier elite, they would have definitely been penetrated by this shooting heart. However, the large black dog had been a celestial king before, so he still possessed some extraordinary abilities, even though his cultivation had already fallen. In any case, he clearly knew how to deal with this situation. "Freeze!" the large black dog shouted as he made a tapping motion with his paw. The blazing heart immediately stopped in midair before slowly hovering above Ling Han's head. Close your eyes and calm your mind. Free yourself of all thoughts and channel the flame control technique. Ling Han sat down and did as he was told. The large black dog made a pointing motion, upon which the blazing heart instantly unleashed rays of light. It was as if it were unleashing a waterfall. The large black dog waved his paw and said, "I'll share some of its essence with you and help you advance to the third severance. When this brat finishes defying the heavens and changing his fate, all of the remaining essence will be for you to absorb." A small spark immediately flew out from the blazing heart and floated toward the Empress. This small spark then hovered above the Empress' head before unleashing a waterfall-like wall of flames. The Empress also sat down to absorb the essence. She didn't feel embarrassed at all, because in her eyes it was only natural that everyone else served her. Did she need to be polite? Boom! It was as if mountains were crumbling and waves were roaring inside Ling Han's body. Each of his cells transformed into a world before being tempered by flames and evolving toward a superior state. Miracles could be nurtured through repetitive tempering. This was analogous to how level 20 godly metal couldn't advance to become genuine divine metal. However, even so, it could be continually tempered and strengthened until it reached the stage of 10-star pseudo-divine metal. It would only be slightly inferior to genuine divine metal. Ling Han was the same. Although his physique wasn't perfect, the flames of this celestial king were helping him cleanse the impurities in his body. Only the purest of essence remained. These flames would then use the essence of the celestial king to nurture and strengthen Ling Han. Otherwise, if he was only tempered and not nurtured, Ling Han would definitely be incinerated into ashes. Even so, he still couldn't help but groan in pain. This process was far too agonizing. This was a heart-wrenching pain that reached the depths of his soul, so it would be useless even if he were knocked unconscious. He would still be able to clearly feel this unbearable pain. This was a fundamental transformation. After all, Ling Han didn't possess a divine fetus. Anyhow, what was a divine fetus? If a clan had a celestial king-tier ancestor, and the regulations of the celestial king materialized upon some descendant, this would give birth to a divine fetus. The owner of this divine fetus would possess an extraordinary power, and they would often be invincible among those at the same cultivation level. Right now, an eighth heaven celestial king had refined his own body and extracted his own essence in order to strengthen Ling Han. Was this not enough to comprehensively elevate the level of Ling Han's foundation? One had to realize that the heavenly fire celestial king had possessed the ability to advance to the ninth heaven. Although he hadn't succeeded, this wasn't a reason to deny his formidable power. Moreover, he had comprehended Tao as the nine heavens flame, and he was a being who had been nurtured by the essence of heaven and earth. As such, just how valuable was this offering? Ling Han's body was developing into a divine fetus. However, there were also huge differences between different divine fetuses. After all, could the remnant regulations of a first heaven celestial king compare to the remnant regulations of an eighth heaven celestial king? Moreover, this was a supremely powerful eighth heaven celestial king. Not only that, but they hadn't held back as they refined their own body. Ling Han forcefully suppressed his pain as he channeled the flame control technique and guided the flames to reconstruct his body. Meanwhile, he also channeled the indestructible heaven scroll to protect his weakened divine sense. Otherwise, he would collapse under these extremely formidable flames. "Old friend, you can finally rest forever," the large black dog said as he removed his laughable blood dragon armor. He had only used this suit of armor to conceal his power. Right now, he naturally didn't need it anymore. Of course, he obviously wouldn't be willing to remove his iron underwear. Otherwise, he would lose his eye-catching demeanor as Grandpa Dog. A smile surprisingly spread across the colossal giant's face. He then nodded before crumbling and falling apart. Pum! He transformed into countless bursts of flames that shot into the surroundings. Under the suppressive power of these flames, all of the chaotic aura in the hidden dragon mystery realm vanished without a trace. First heaven celestial kings were nothing but trash before eighth heaven celestial kings, so the aura that they left behind in this mystery realm was naturally also wiped away with ease. 10 days passed, and the Empress suddenly unleashed a long cry. Under the help of the celestial king-tier power, she had already opened the door to the third severance. She started to undergo heavenly tribulation, and she performed her third severance of heaven and earth amid the vicious arcs of lightning. This enraged heaven and earth. Yet the heavenly Tao also had to guard its own regulations. It wasn't long before her heavenly tribulation calmed down and disappeared. Before the Empress could even speak, the large black dog pointed at the spark of flame above her, causing a portion of its power to funnel into her. This forced the Empress to sit down again, accepting the transformation bestowed by the celestial flame. She already possessed a divine fetus, so this transformation naturally wasn't to give her a flaming divine fetus. Instead, it was a transformation to strengthen her divine fetus. The large black dog clasped his paws behind his back, and his expression finally became incredibly solemn for the very first time. Time, it's always time. There's always not enough time. If the storm of darkness surges over, will this brat have enough time to grow and develop? He murmured. Those old monsters aren't driven, and they don't plan to suppress this storm of darkness. Instead, they're always causing trouble and fighting among themselves. I definitely can't allow them to discover the existence of this brat. Otherwise, this plan of hundreds of millions of years will vanish in a puff of smoke. Brat, don't die on me. Even though your path is destined to be filled with extraordinary difficulties and obstacles, and even though you might be forced to walk this path alone and become the enemy of all other beings, you're the only one who's capable of walking to the end. Because you're the only hope left behind by the heavenly venerate. Ling Han couldn't hear the large black dog's murmurings. Right now, he was completely focused on battling against the power of the flames and guiding them through his body. He was maximizing the benefit of these flames, and this process of tempering and transformation was an extremely slow and gradual one. After all, it had taken Gu Daoyi 10 lifetimes to finally develop his divine fetus. Although Ling Han had the help of a mighty celestial king, this still wasn't something that could be completed in an instance. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. After almost 10 years, the blazing heart finally started to dim. It dimmed at an incredible rate, and after 3 days, the blazing heart completely lost its radiance. A gust of wind blew over, causing the heart to disintegrate into ashes. The last remaining remnant of the heavenly fire celestial king vanished into thin air. Just like how he had been nurtured by the essence of heaven and earth, he was now returning to the embrace of heaven and earth. Ling Han and the Empress opened their eyes in unison. They then stood up together. Peak stage of the third severance. Even though the essence of the celestial king had mainly been used to temper and reconstruct their respective physique, just a wisp of this essence had been enough to raise their cultivation by an astonishing amount. They were easily raised to the peak stage of the third severance. However, the celestial king tier power wasn't enough to help them perform the fourth severance. This was something that they had to comprehend by themselves. It was also because of this that the large black dog first helped the Empress advance to the third severance. Otherwise, the extra essence of the celestial king would have been wasted. Brat, you'll have to fend for yourself in the future. Also, remember to cause more trouble. Otherwise, I'll be ashamed to be associated with you. The large black dog waved his paw and continued. All right, my task here is already complete, so it's time for me to fulfill my dream of many years. He spread his 4 legs and instantly vanished into the distance. Chapter 1841 Surrounded. Chapter 1841 Surrounded. The large black dog left, with his demeanor as carefree as could be. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh as he watched him disappearing into the distance. With his return to the world, heavens knew how many people would suffer at his debauched hands. Ling Han silently prayed for these victims. He then exchanged a smile with the Empress before walking away from where they had sat for almost a decade. My divine fetus has become more powerful, the Empress said. After being tempered by the flames of the celestial king, her divine fetus had ascended to a new height. Even though she was still limited to summoning 9 doppelgangers, each one of them would be several times more powerful than before. Moreover, even though her divine fetus hadn't transitioned into one of the flame element, it had still received many benefits from the flame element. It had now become extremely amiable with flames, and she could more easily and quickly manipulate the fire particles that existed among heaven and earth. Celestials were powerful because they could wield regulations and directly use the great Tao to crush others. Thus, Genesis tier cultivators would be crushed by severing mundane tier cultivators regardless of how many heavenly bodies they cultivated. Regulations were superior and transcendent to power. However, regulations also needed to be manipulated, and there was a process of transforming them into usable battle prowess. The more affinity one had with the great Tao, the quicker they would be able to summon regulations. It was entirely possible that 2 cultivators were just as powerful as each other, yet one of them managed to instantly defeat the other because they were able to summon regulations more quickly. It was because of this that the large black dog had previously said that Ling Han could only rank among the lower quartile when compared to other genuine prodigies of celestial king tier forces. He hadn't been deflating Ling Han on purpose. Right now, the Empress could easily and quickly wield regulations of the fire element. Compared to those at the same cultivation level, her speed was many times quicker. At the same time, the might of her regulations was also significantly greater. "How about you?" the Empress asked. Ling Han smiled in reply. Boom! Bursts of flames erupted from his body, completely transforming him into a ball of flames. "I've obtained a fire element divine fetus, and apart from developing a strong affinity with fire element regulations, I can also fuse together with the great Tao of fire. I can temporarily draw on its power to do battle." Generally speaking, divine fetuses were all like this. They would allow their owners to develop a stronger affinity with regulations, and they would also allow their owners to manipulate regulations that exceeded their cultivation level. However, this definitely couldn't last for long. Sometimes one would even need to pay a huge price for this power. "What level can your most powerful strike reach now?" the Empress asked in curiosity. Ling Han pondered for a moment before answering. "Even if Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng revive, I can dispose of them with a single strike." Of course, this was after he fused together with the great Tao of fire and borrowed its power. The Empress smiled upon hearing this. The more powerful Ling Han was, the happier she would naturally become. At this moment, Ling Han also understood that the large black dog hadn't been lying to him. There existed supreme prodigies who were far more powerful than him in the celestial realm. To say nothing else, just the difference between two cultivators' affinity with regulations was enough to separate their battle prowess by heaven knew how much. The built-up potential of 7th heaven, 8th heaven, and 9th heaven celestial kings was unfathomably astonishing. After accumulating for countless epochs, they all possessed innumerable treasures and inheritances. As such, they could easily nurture supremely powerful prodigies. "Then let's test our power out," Ling Han said with vigor. Coming from a small world, he had defeated and trampled an exorbitant number of prodigies. This wouldn't change any time soon. The Empress was also brimming with confidence. She had already possessed a divine fetus before this, and it had now become even more powerful. As such, she could now rival genuine supreme prodigies. Anyhow, there was no mountain for them to descend now, and they quickly returned to the canyon. However, the people here had already left. Right now, the canyon was completely deserted. Although the chaotic aura had already vanished from the mystery realm, no one else was clear about what had happened. Moreover, the time limit of 10 years was almost up, so they naturally started to leave the mystery realm. After all, who dared to risk their life? Ling Han and the Empress didn't stay in the canyon either. Instead, they continued to head toward the entrance of the mystery realm. They were extremely quick, and it only took them a few days to catch up to the last group of leaving cultivators. They then caught up to the second last group, the third last group. When they finally exited the mystery realm, they had passed almost half of all the remaining cultivators. Right now, the entrance of the mystery realm was bustling with activity. Some people were delighted, while some people were solemn. Those who were delighted were naturally overjoyed that their clan members had successfully exited the mystery realm and brought with them a large number of blood dragon stones. Meanwhile, those who were feeling solemn were worried because their clan members still hadn't exited the mystery realm yet. They were worried that they had died. "Something incredible has happened!" someone suddenly shouted. A supremely vicious person entered the mystery realm this time, and they killed several holy sons and holy daughters. That's right. Qian Zhao Tian, Bei Xianming, Bei Yuxiong, and some others were all killed by this vicious person. That vicious person is called Ling Han. It wasn't long before news of Ling Han's great feats spread far and wide, with all of the forces learning of his actions. For example, the Qianzhao clan and the Lunar sect. Although they were slightly doubtful that their holy sons or successors had been killed by Ling Han, the fact that everyone was repeating the same thing, and the fact that Qianzhao Tian and Bei Xianming still hadn't exited the mystery realm, yet forced them to slowly accept this reality. When Ling Han and the Empress exited the mystery realm, a devastating aura instantly washed over them. At least 100 elites appeared before them and blocked their path. Did you kill Qian Zhao Tian? Did you kill Bei Xiong? Did you kill? These were all dividing soul tier elites, and at this moment they were all brimming with a murderous aura. They were radiating with a formidable aura that would cause even severing mundane tier grand elders to tremble in fear. Ling Han smiled calmly and replied, "Probably. I don't have the time and effort to remember the name of some trash. You're far too arrogant." The dividing soul tier elites were enraged. A measly cultivator at the peak stage of the third severance actually dared to act so audaciously before them? Which of them couldn't raise their hand and easily kill Ling Han 100 times over? "Foolish Junior, since you've admitted your crimes, it's time for you to die," a dividing soul tier elite from the Qianzhao clan said coldly. He was called Qianzhao Yu, and in 3-star forces, dividing soul tier elites could be considered as absolutely mighty figures. Thus, his demeanor was naturally high and mighty. Right now, he was burning with fury. Ling Han had actually dared to kill a successor of the Qianzhao clan. This was blatant provocation toward the Qianzhao clan. He was a measly third severance cultivator, so how did he dare to do this? Qian Zhaoyu still wasn't aware that Qian Zhaoyang had also died at the hands of Ling Han. Otherwise, he would have definitely exploded in rage. Raising a potential successor was no easy task. It required a huge amount of time and resources. Thus, losing 2 potential successors at once was a huge blow to the Qianzhao clan. "I'll deal with him," an elite of the Beiyu clan roared and stepped forward. He was also seething with rage. "No, I'll deal with him," another person shouted. The dividing soul tier elites were all itching to kill Ling Han. "Wait!" Whoosh! A figure suddenly dashed over, and they radiated with a paramount aura that seemed as if it could suppress the heavens. Even the dividing soul tier elites couldn't help but retreat. Immortal Palace tier. Lord Fu Yen. The dividing soul tier elites greeted in respect. Regardless of where they were, Immortal Palace tier cultivators could always be referred to as elites. They would enjoy a high status, even in Celestial King tier forces. This Immortal Palace tier elite was none other than Fu Yan, and he had come here at the direction of Fu Xinbing. His task was to ensure Ling Han's safety. Of course, the elites from the Rock Palace had also come to ensure Ling Han's safety. However, Fu Yan had still chosen to step forward first. This was naturally to butter up to the Rock Palace. That was a Celestial King tier force, so was it not freakish and impressive? Fu Yan was brimming with might and dignity. Although he was stepping forward to butter up to the Rock Palace, he still possessed a sense of superiority before the dividing soul tier elites. He raised his hand slightly, signifying to the others that they didn't need to pay respects. There was an air of arrogance and haughtiness about him. "Dare I ask, Lord Fu Yan, why are you stopping us?" the dividing soul tier elites asked. Although they were weaker than Fu Yan, the forces behind them weren't weaker than the Fu clan. Thus, they didn't need to cower. In any case, the battleships of their forces were also hovering in the sky. These could completely be treated as Immortal Palace tier elites. Chapter 1842. My Fu clan will accept all challenges. Chapter 1842. My Fu clan will accept all challenges. Fu Yan sighed in his mind. In reality, he naturally didn't want to become enemies with so many 3-star forces. After all, the Fu clan wasn't a top-notch 3-star force. In fact, just the lunar sect alone could already suppress them. However, in order to butter up to the Rock Palace, he couldn't abandon his current facade of arrogance and haughtiness. Otherwise, his performance would be lacking in sincerity. The more difficult it was for him to protect Ling Han, the more it would display the Fu clan's unwavering determination. Of course, Fu Yan was unaware that the Zai clan and the Thundercloud Palace still hadn't received news of their holy daughter and holy son's death yet. Otherwise, he would definitely scream that he had been screwed over. To oppose two celestial king tier forces was this not an act of stupidity? However, it was a shame that he didn't know about this. Thus, he continued to resolutely protect Ling Han and butter up to the Rock Palace. He wore a dignified expression, and he clasped his hands behind his back as he calmly said, "Listen to my advice. Don't touch a single hair of this person." What? The dividing soul tier elites were astounded. In fact, some of them even started to doubt their own ears. Indeed, Fu Yan was more powerful than all of the other cultivators present. However, the Fu clan wasn't a clan that could suppress all of their forces. Not only was it also a 3-star force, but it was a 3-star force that only ranked in the lower quartile. As such, where was his confidence coming from? Once the other forces formed an alliance, it was guaranteed that the Fu clan would be instantly razed to the ground. In any case, could Fu Yan rival them if they teamed up to attack with their battleships? Even Ling Han and the Empress were slightly astonished. Not long ago, hadn't they severed all ties with Fu Gaoyan? That being the case, why had Fu Yan suddenly rushed over to protect them? Moreover, it was as if he were willing to protect them at all costs. Had he taken the wrong medicine? Anyhow, Ling Han had initially planned to appear before the dividing soul tier elites before entering the Black Tower to escape. However, since Fu Yan had stepped forward, he was willing to observe the situation first. "Lord Fu Yan, are you sure you want to do this?" Qian Zhao Yu asked. A cold expression had already spread across his face. He was indeed weaker than Fu Yan. However, the Qianzhou clan was no weaker than the Fu clan. Thus, he didn't need to act in a meek and subservient manner. Moreover, there were many other elites beside him, all of whom were on his side. The Fu clan was inciting public wrath, and enough ants could even kill an elephant. Not to mention they were a pack of wolves. The Fu clan was nothing before them. Fu Yan's expression darkened, and he said, "Are you threatening me?" Although he was under immense pressure, could the might of an immortal palace tier elite be challenged by any random person? Regardless of whether I'm in the right or not, since you're only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, you have no option but to cower and be blindly subservient toward me. "Lord Fu Yan, do you know what this person has done?" an elite from the lunar sect asked. His name was Zhao Lingfeng. Fu Yan's heart jolted. One had to realize that the elites before him were all from different forces. Moreover, they were from at least several dozen different forces. What has this brat done? He felt a strong urge to slap Ling Han a few times. However, his expression remained calm, and he said, "I genuinely don't know. He killed the holy son of my sect." Zhao Lingfeng roared. "Dong!" Fu Yan felt as if his heart had been struck by a heavy blow. If it weren't for his incredible self-control, his expression would have definitely changed drastically, and he might have even exclaimed in astonishment, "Brat, you're far too much of a troublemaker." The lunar sect was one of the 3 most powerful sects in this region. Thus, if they truly decided to unleash their full power, they could definitely destroy the entire Fu clan. Yet, Ling Han had actually killed the holy son of such a sect? Such audacity. And the potential successors of my clan as well. 2 of them. Qian Zhao Yu said in a menacing voice. He had only received this news just then. Not only had Qian Zhao Tian been killed by Ling Han, but even Qian Zhao Yang had been killed by him. This was a blatant provocation toward the Qian Zhao clan. Thus, Qian Zhao Yu wouldn't cower or back down regardless of who stood before him at this moment. This was because he represented the Qian Zhao clan, a powerful 3-star force. As strong as Fu Yan's self-control was, he still couldn't help but grimace upon hearing this. How nice! Not only did you offend the lunar sect, but you've even offended the Qianzhao clan. Moreover, you've killed 2 of their potential successors. Are you trying to destroy their entire future generation? And the holy son of my sect as well. And the potential successor of my clan. And the dividing soul-tier elites spoke one after another, revealing Ling Han's long list of crimes. Holy fuck! At this moment, only these 2 words remained in Fu Yan's mind. He finally recalled the information that he had read before. While Ling Han had still been extremely weak, he had already battled against the Ding clan and the Shao clan. In fact, he had even destroyed the physical body of a prodigy from the Han clan. He had offended these clans to the extreme. This was an audacious person, and he had a history of provoking others. His ability to cause trouble was simply through the roof. Grand Elder, oh, Grand Elder, aren't you screwing me over by telling me to protect this brat? With my skinny arms and skinny legs, how can I withstand the wrath of so many forces? As he listened on, Fu Yan's mind gradually became numb. He was confident that no piece of news could astonish him anymore. Fu Yan gritted his teeth and said, regardless of what this brat has done, no one is allowed to target him. In the end, he still had to utter this sentence. However, he felt a slight sense of anticipation because only by saying this could he display the worth of the Fu clan stepping forward. I'm risking so much, so the Rock Palace has to give something in return, right? Milady, we're still not going to step forward, a female knight asked. The golden female knight of the Rock Palace waved her hand and said, we'll let these clowns perform for a while longer. Anyhow, we've already found our target, so there's no need to hurry. Understood. What expression would Fu Yan wear if he heard this exchange? He was performing with all his might, yet he was being viewed as nothing more than a clown. However, this also made sense. After all, did a Celestial King tier force truly need cannon fodder like him? Moreover, was the Rock Palace an ordinary Celestial King tier force? In their eyes, even Celestial Kings beneath the 5th heaven were nothing to worry about. That being the case, how could they care about the Fu clan? It was clear that the Fu clan had chosen the wrong target to butter up to. The gulf between them and the Rock Palace was far too great, and this was analogous to a village leader buttering up to a supreme emperor. Would the emperor give a damn? Meanwhile, the elites from the lunar sect and the other forces exploded upon hearing Fu Yan's words. This person had gone fucking crazy. If the Fu clan had been a 4-star force, they would have had no option but to concede. However, they were all 3-star forces, and the Fu clan more so ranked in the bottom quartile. Yet they actually dared to act with such haughtiness and arrogance. Had the Fu clan gone mad? An elite from the Beiyu clan couldn't help but warn, Lord Fu Yan, I'm sure that you're already aware. We represent 37 different forces, and which of us is weaker than the Fu clan? There was a threatening edge to his voice. However, Fu Yan had already made up his mind. He smiled and said, Juniors, I'm actually doing this for your sake. Don't ruin yourselves. Upon hearing this, the dividing soul tier elites couldn't help but explode with fury. A string of curses raced through their minds. He's killed our successors, and you're preventing us from exacting revenge now. Yet you're claiming that this is for our own good. Good your mom. Are you taking us for fools? Huh. Since Lord Fu insists, we naturally don't dare to do anything now. However, can the Fu clan withstand the wrath of so many forces? Zhao Lingfeng said in a menacing voice, to say nothing else of the other forces. Just the fury of the lunar sect alone was enough to destroy the entire Fu clan. Fu Yan flicked his sleeve and said, Give me everything you've got. My Fu clan will accept all challenges. His voice was filled with confidence and haughtiness. Oh, but can you truly accept them? A cold voice suddenly asked. Everyone looked over, only to see a figure descending from the sky. They were radiating with an aura that was no weaker than that of Fu Yan. In fact, it was significantly more powerful. Chapter 1843. Can you truly accept them? Chapter 1843. Can you truly accept them? Immortal Palace Tier Elite. Lord Zai, the Dividing Soul Tier elites exclaimed. They hurriedly kneeled down and greeted him with respect. When coming across elites, it was natural for those who were weaker to pay their respects. Moreover, not only did this Immortal Palace Tier elite possess a superior cultivation, but he had even come from a Celestial King Tier force. Thus, to say nothing of them, even the ancestors of their forces would have to treat him with utmost respect. This person was called Zai Ji. Fu Yan's heart involuntarily jolted upon seeing him. He could act with arrogance and haughtiness before Qian Zhaoyu and the others, and it wouldn't matter even if they teamed up to target him. He could dispose of them with a single hand. Even if they used their battleships, he could still rely on his movement techniques to calmly dodge their attacks. He would face absolutely no risk of suffering any wounds. The cannons of these battleships needed to lock onto their target. With his strength as an Immortal Palace Tier elite, would he allow these cannons to lock onto him? Meanwhile, Ling Han wasn't afraid of things exploding out of control. He was enjoying the show, and he even retrieved a chair to sit down on. The Empress sat in his lap, and he appeared as carefree as could be. Fu Yan almost exploded in rage. Who's caused all of this trouble? How detestable! If it weren't for the Rock Palace, I would have already diced you into mincemeat. Before Zai Ji, Fu Yan didn't dare to act with such arrogance anymore. Brother Zai, give me some face this time. Zai Ji's expression was ice cold, and he calmly said, Who do you think you are? Give you some face? You're not worthy. Fu Yan was brutally rejected, and he couldn't help but go red with anger. He was also an Immortal Palace Tier elite, yet he was being humiliated before so many people. How could he endure this? Lin Fang and the others chuckled coldly as they watched this. Ling Han, so what if you're freakishly talented? You're destined to die today. With two elites from two different Celestial King Tier forces stepping forward, Fu Yan won't even dare to make a peep. At that time, how can you, a measly third Severance cultivator, escape from the grasp of the Immortal Palace Tier elites? It's completely impossible. You're dead meat. Fu Yan's breathing quickened, and only after a short while did he finally manage to compose himself. Brother Zai, has this brat also offended your mighty clan? Upon hearing this, Zai Ji's expression became even colder. He definitely had to exact revenge. However, the culprit who had killed their successor was only at the Severing Mundane Tier. As such, he wasn't willing to announce this before so many people. It was far too humiliating. Oh, the successor of a Celestial King Tier force was even weaker than some random cultivator, and they were even killed with ease. Announcing this would be equivalent to humiliating the Zai clan. Enough with the nonsense. Hurry up and piss off. Zai Ji said in impatience. Not only was he more powerful than Fu Yan, but he had even come from a Celestial King Tier force. Thus, he didn't need to give him any face at all. Yet, Fu Yan seemed to feel overly confident, and he continued to babble rubbish before him. Fu Yan's legs were trembling. He was naturally aware that Zai Ji had come from a Celestial King Tier force, and he was naturally aware that Zai Ji was someone he could only gaze up at. However, he gazed toward the female knight from the Rock Palace. The sight of her defeating the 9 elites from the Fu clan was still fresh in his mind. He gritted his teeth and said, Brother Zai, if it isn't some great matter, the Fu clan is willing to make compensations for this brat. In his mind, Ling Han might have been overly arrogant and accidentally offended the successor of this Celestial King Tier force. This was something that could be resolved with peace. Ha ha ha. Zai Ji roared with laughter. However, there was no smile on his face. How laughable! after killing the successor of a celestial king tier force. A measly 3-star force was now claiming that they were willing to offer compensation. How would they compensate them? What would they compensate them with? Did they know how many resources were needed to raise a severing mundane tier successor who had severed heaven and earth? It was enough resources to instantly plunge a 3-star force into poverty. Fine, since you insist, it won't hurt for me to tell you. Zai Ji's expression was ice cold, and he continued, This detestable brat killed Zai Bingyun, the successor of my clan. Pah! Fu Yen stumbled back and collapsed to the ground. What did it matter that he was an immortal palace tier elite? Right now he was feeling as weak and feeble as could be. Brat, how have you survived until now? Fu Yen wanted to cry, yet no tears were forthcoming. He had initially wanted to butter up to the Rock Palace, yet now, not only had he failed to butter up to them, but he had even offended the Zai clan now. Even seeking death wasn't this bad. I'm done with this. I'm completely done with this. Fu Yen hurriedly crawled up, saying, This brat is actually this detestable? I was also deceived. Brother Zai, please. He was indeed an elite, and his attitude changed quicker than the pages of a book could be flipped. The other elites couldn't help but look at him with disdain. Weren't you all arrogant and mighty just then? Why have you suddenly become a coward? Oh, it's fortunate that you said this. Otherwise, you'd already be a corpse. Crackle! A bolt of lightning descended from the sky. This was a solidly built man, and his entire body was covered in arcs of white lightning. As they intertwined, they formed numerous symbols of the great Tao. Just his presence alone was enough to frighten everyone present. Everyone had to face heavenly tribulation. Thus, lightning was undoubtedly something that many people detested. This man was Sun Zhen, an elite from the Thundercloud Palace. Fu Yan's frail heart involuntarily shuddered again. Did Ling Han also do something to the holy son of the Thundercloud Palace? Gasp! It can't be right. He didn't dare to ponder this anymore. Holy fuck! How can there exist such a troublemaker in the world? The Fu clan definitely can't shoulder his crimes. We simply can't shoulder his crimes. He respectfully stepped back. Although Qian Jiaoyu and the others were gazing at him in disdain, he simply pretended that he couldn't see their gazes. This was no time to act with arrogance. Ling Han, how audacious of you! Sun Jin roared. His voice was like booming thunder. Ling Han grinned and said, You're right, I'm indeed an audacious person. Upon hearing this, those who had been slightly doubtful about Ling Han killing Zai Bingyun were fully convinced that he was the culprit. Just listen. He was actually speaking to an immortal palace tier elite with such disrespect. That being the case, would he give a damn about killing a severing mundane tier cultivator? Sun Jin faltered upon hearing this. He hadn't been praising Ling Han, so why was this brat so proud of himself? He humphed before continuing, Since you've admitted it, you can go die. Brother Sun, let the Zai clan deal with this brat. Zai Ji said as he stepped forward and grabbed Sun Zhen's wrist. He stopped Sun Zhen from attacking Ling Han. Ling Han was only at the peak stage of the third severance, so how had he killed Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng? This brat definitely harbored some great secret. As such, Zai Ji wanted to personally kill him so that he could pluck his soul and steal his secrets. Sun Zhen chuckled and said, Fine, I'll kill him, and you can take his corpse. Zai Ji also chuckled, saying, Since you're already willing to hand his corpse to me, why don't you let me kill him as well? Brother Zai, you're pushing things a little. This brat killed the holy son of my sect. So how can I let him off without doing anything? Is it not the same if I deal with him? The most important thing is the result. The two elites started to argue with each other. Both of them wanted to kill Ling Han, as doing so would allow them to pluck his soul at this first instance. After all, They couldn't trust each other to share his secrets. Everyone came to a sudden realization upon seeing this. They had naturally come across similar situations before, so they all knew what these two elites were arguing about. Ling Han sighed and said, "Have you two finished arguing or not? I don't have so much time to waste." It was a shame that the large black dog had already left. Otherwise, he could unleash his might and dispose of these measly immortal palace tier elites in the blink of an eye. "Brother Sun, then let's rely on our own abilities," Saiji said. He knew that he couldn't convince Sun Jian, so he decided not to speak any more nonsense. "Agreed," Sun Jian said with a nod. In the end, arguments between cultivators were always settled using power. They both lashed out to snatch Ling Han's life. Pa! However, just as they raised their hands, 2 lengths of white silk suddenly shot over from the sky in the distance, wrapping around their wrists and forcefully stopping their attacks.